Hello everyone, this is Chris, the host of the panel you're about to listen to. I just wanted to quickly come on here and thank everybody who attended this amazing event. A huge thank you goes to Logan Hillier, the man behind the character of Ishtvan Toth, who tuned in and answered all kinds of interesting questions the Evil Gang had on their minds. If everything goes to plan, there will be more of these panels in the future, so if your question did not get answered in this one, there will definitely be an opportunity for that in the future. Now, without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy the panel. Ishtvan Toth be praised. Have fun. Thank you. Hello. Oh my gosh. Uh, Hi, everyone. For some reason, I'm hearing myself, and I don't like. Hold on. Did I fix it? Oh, yes. Yes. Okay. Oh, hello.
Hello.
I'm hearing myself for some reason. I don't like that. Oh, crap. All right. Does anybody know how to fix that? 'Cause I'm genuinely. Oh, huh? What?
Yeah, I can speak. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, it works now. Thank you.
Yeah, no
Jeez.
problem.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone. There's so many people here. That is crazy. Uh, thank you all for coming. I've never done this before, so it's gonna be a bit of a freestyle ride, but at least I'm not hearing myself, which is great.
You're going to be fine.
Thank you. I hope so. Um, all right. I want to see the chat. Where can I see that? Holy cow. Okay. Should we should we get started somehow? Probably.
Yeah, I mean, I can just explain to everybody what I think, how the structure of the evening will work. And then I think we've got quite a lot kind of pre-prepared. But we're going to split the evening into like 5 sections. Probably the first one will be the longest, which is called Toth, and we'll handle all the acting questions there and anything relating to the character and that kind of thing. And then the kind of goth, toth, thought Meowstvan really covers the fan fiction, I think.
Yeah.
And my thoughts on, my own thoughts on the character, which is not, obviously they're my opinions and the work I did, and that don't represent, necessarily anything canon. And also where, the different directions that other people have taken the character. Okay.
Yep. Sounds great. All right. Jeez. Okay. There's so many people here. I'm shocked, honestly. Thank you, everybody, for
Don't
and
panic.
thank you, Logan, for making time and for doing this for us. We really
No problem.
appreciate
I
it.
love it. I love it. So, my pleasure, guys. Seriously, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, we love your character, and I think I can speak for everybody in the Evil Gang when I say that your interactions with us on Twitter are just amazing and absolutely we live for that. We live for that. So yeah.
I'm glad you're enjoying the show.
All right, we have Dan from Memes of KCD joining. Awesome. I hope.
Hey, Dan.
Hello, welcome.
How are we all doing? All right.
Yeah.
Jolly good, thank you.
How you doing, Lord Toth?
Very well this evening. And how does it find you, Dan?
Well, I don't know what to expect really. I just want to say to Chris, don't worry. This will be bread and butter to you eventually. I was nervous when I did my first one. Honestly, I didn't know what to say. Like I was stuttering. I was like, But eventually, you'll just like sail through it. So, I'm not going to steal your spotlight or anything like that. This is your space, and all I just want to say is enjoy yourself. And have fun. And hello, everyone else here. I will now shut up, and I'll hand back over to you two. That's Chris and, of course, Logan. So I'm going to mute now. So over to you, mate.
Thank you so much, Dan. I appreciate that. All right. So, yeah, should we just straight up start with the questions?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's the best way.
All right. So, we have the first question from so general questions, right? Just acting and the character stuff and all of that. So, we have a question from Langzuma on Twitter, for Logan, obviously. Do you see yourself doing more video game acting? And if so, what kind of role or genre would you be excited to take on next?
Okay, this is a great question, and yes, 100%. I love it. It's great fun. Obviously, I had this weird situation with Stalker 2 coming out at the same time as Kingdom Come, and kind of working on them a little bit. Kind of overlapping at times, and so it was really my first taste of it on this kind of grand level. I mean, Kingdom Come 1, of course, first, but yeah, I really enjoy it, and I think, as I said in the interview before, it's a certain type of acting I think is required, and I'm sure Tom can speak to this a little bit, but it's a kind of unique blend of different types of theories and techniques, I think. And since I did a lot of studio theatre over the years, I think I've got quite an aptitude for it. So I'd like to do more and get better. And what would I like to do? I've thought about this quite a bit recently because obviously, you never know what's going to happen. But in the perfect world, I think I'd like to do something gothic. I really like we talk about role-playing games and stuff, but for me, one of the role-playing games I kind of got into right at the end of the time I was playing was the World of Darkness stuff, like Vampire, the Masquerade, and Werewolf, and these kind of games. And I think there's been a few. Like I think there's maybe one recently, like Bloodlines or something, may have come out again. I'm not sure. But I'd really like to do something like innovative or kind of off the wall a little bit with the kind of World of Darkness stuff. That would be perfect. Yeah, I guess that's my thoughts at the moment. But I do whatever, like I can turn my hand. But in the perfect world, probably some gothic horror.
That would be amazing. Like, that would be awesome. We have a lot of people like connecting Istvan to vampires. So yeah, that's awesome.
Sorry, can I just butt in? I can't click the comments. Like I'm trying to click like the speech bubble, like for the comments, but nothing's.
I'm not seeing
I
any
don't know if
comments
it's
either,
me.
and it's so weird. I have no idea where the comments are. There could be no comments yet. They're just people listening. Sorry. Hi, everyone.
Hello. It's okay.
Hello.
I'm gonna be quiet now.
You're okay.
Can I butt in with a
Hello.
quick question?
Yeah.
Just a small one. I wanted to ask, how did you get into, this kind of game voice acting and mocap in the first place? Like, what led to it, basically?
Well, this is a long, journey for me, but like, I was connected into the Prague scene of actors, so I know pretty much everyone in terms of acting in town. I was a director here of an English language theatre company for a very long time, and I did many theatre productions. Like, I've probably got 100 under my belt across Prague. And because the kind of expat scene's quite small here, then the theatre world really overlaps with the acting world. And so you get kind of sourced for, small English speaking parts in films that are being made in Barrandov and so on. So that's how it kind of happened for me. It was like theatre into, small parts in TV shows and stuff. But he's still doing the theatre and everything. And then Kingdom Come. So that's kind of, and some voice work as well over the time. But like, yeah, often with this stuff, it's about networking. I mean, everybody will tell you it's not, how good you are necessarily, but it's who you know. So because the scene is quite small here, but the film industry is massive in Prague, it creates this kind of, it's a very nice environment basically for a small group of actors here. But we've worked extremely hard, as I said in the interview. We've got all individually got thousands and thousands of hours of acting under our belts. Does that answer your question, I think?
Yes, thank you. Did you anticipate that at the second game, like the first and the second game, that would kind of explode this way, and there will be just so much, attention to it?
Yeah, no, I realised it when the trailer came out. To be fair, no, actually, no, maybe a bit before that. No, I knew ahead it was going to be epic. And actually, I changed quite a lot because I changed quite a lot of my plans actually, and I realised from just being part of the project that it was going to be huge. But it's surprising me now. Like it really is surprising me now to the point where like I don't want to kind of like coming off as kind of like trying to pat anyone on the back kind of thing, but like this is probably in 25 years this is going to be seen as a very significant cultural phenomena in Czech Republic for sure, and across the world, I would think. I mean, if you're going to get like rated 7th most influential game by BAFTA, then they know something that's happening. I think there's some recency bias in that as well, but I think also Warhorse has been doing so many innovative things with marketing and changing the perception of games and all sorts of stuff. So I kind of knew it was going to be big, but I am still surprised by just how big, and I think it's continuing to get bigger and bigger as people realize, especially with modding, as people realize that they can play with it even more. And there's depth to it, which is what I love exploring on Twitter with you guys. There's lots of depth in it, so you can have lots of really interesting conversations off the back of it. And that's where maybe, it's closer to more like really good TV, like Lost or Game of Thrones or Thrawn or something like that. It's got that kind of, and that's why I started calling it kind of like a meta medieval thing. Because I think when you move out of strictly this kind of episode thing and into a world where people are making fan fiction and taking the characters in different directions and all that it becomes very meta, which is extremely interesting. Again, because I think this is a relatively new phenomena in human history, and we're still learning how to handle this kind of event. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
It does, yeah. It's definitely new. The Warhorse knew what they were doing with their marketing, so they did well, yeah. But thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, that was awesome.
Sorry, I wanted to follow up with the Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines that you mentioned. I wanted to ask, do you know the system itself, or did you play the first game or saw it somehow? Because I'm a big fan, and the
Oh,
fact that you
okay.
mentioned it, it's just
Okay. Well,
brings
actually,
joy.
it started off with Mage, the Ascension.
Oh,
I think I hit that in like 1997. I didn't actually hit Vampire until LARP at university, and I got introduced to the LARP, and then because I was an actor, I kind of looked at it the way they were doing it. It wasn't very theatrical. It was very underplayed. And I decided, just as a kind of theatre experiment, I was going to try and really up the kind of theatrics, if you like, the production quality of the LARPing. And I did. I think I did a good job there. It was very interesting. Like, well, I won't go into the technical details of that because it's probably too long. And then I went to America for a year. And over there, it was massive at the time. LARP was enormous. They had like whole nightclubs full of like people dressed in like full on vampire outfits and all different games kind of interacting and stuff. And so that was fascinating. And I'm not a big fan of like D10, you know, if you want to get all RPG nerd. I'm not a big fan of
yeah,
their
yeah.
math system. I think that's a bit weak. I tended to like replace these with my own like dice systems because I think it's not particularly good for that. But like the storytelling in World of Darkness is excellent and the lore is excellent. You know, it's as good as I would say 40k. Personally, they're my favourites. Probably Cyberpunk, World of Darkness stuff, and 40k.
This is very exciting because I was thinking about Vampire the Masquerade AU with Hysteric, and I don't know, it's just
Oh
fun.
yeah, no, I think that would be perfect. And I think that's where maybe we get into that a little bit later on with the kind of goth section.
Yeah,
Because this is definitely like goth type questions. But yeah, no, that would be really, really funny. I mean, you can't really do that like on a like a game level because it's an IP, you know, and I doubt they want to take it into a full on Transylvanian kind of, you know, or time travel thing or something like that. But like those type of characters, you know, like the Eric Istvan combo, there is some universality about that, you know, dynamic. And we did it in our own way, me and Jim and Warhorse, you know, but there's something fun about those guys, isn't there? But again, I think maybe we do this more in the goth section.
Great, thank you so much.
No worries.
Okay. We have a question from Annabelle, also on X. What was your initial perception / what were your initial thoughts of Istvan in KCD1, and how did that change going into KCD2, if it changed at all?
Yeah, it definitely changed, right? Because we all changed. So the actors get older and they've got more experience and so on. So it was quite a long time, and there were a rough few years for a variety of different reasons for people. So I think, like I said in the other interview, everybody came back a bit grittier anyway, including the studios themselves. So you know, like their characters definitely gets darker, more complicated in the second one as you know more. And I think he's a bit more of a cipher. Like you see him more on the surface, right? In the first one. And I think you can take a lot from that he's not just a cartoon cutout villain. And when he does stuff like that's a bit Joker-esque or a bit, you know, like mustache twirling stuff, it's kind of clear that he's putting an act on. And I think with Istvan, it's kind of difficult sometimes to know exactly how much truth he's giving you and the way in which he's telling you, because he's a rogue and he's trying to manipulate you in some way nearly all the time, you know? And so I think in terms of the direction of it, I think even in the first one, even though he's a bit more sinister and a bit more, you know, a bit more two-dimensional, you still get the sense that there's depth to him, that there's something driving him, that it's not quite necessarily as cynical as it appears. But then in the second one, obviously, it's different. You really get an intimate view of Istvan, I think. Yeah.
There's a question from Frey adding up to that, actually. What do you think about the messed up visions of Istvan that Henry has in his nightmares after all the stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, like, again, I don't want to speak for Warhorse at all, or because it comes into this idea of realism, doesn't it? You know, like, if you're going to go with a kind of like 20th, 21st century kind of material view of the world, then, and maybe that's the case with, you know, I think that's the sense of realism, you know, no dragons, no magic, this kind of thing. Then you would have to imagine that that vision is the psychological, you know, projection of Istvan in Henry's nightmares. So he's seeing himself, you know, he's seeing this arch Istvan, which is representing, you know, deeper, complex questions he's got about the moral dilemma he's in and what he's doing in X situation and Y situation. So, yeah, that would be the most kind of like simplest way of answering that question. And then unless you go into these kind of spiritual dimensions where Istvan is somehow, you know, actually haunting him, you know, and it's not just his own kind of dread. But again, that's not really for me to say what the truth is there. I'm assuming it's the psychology of him. It's the dream. There's no real haunting going on. I think if I remember the question, it was, is that what they were after, or does that answer the question?
I think so. Yeah, I was just asking about your thoughts on that. So,
well, yeah, I mean, again, like some of that there was another much more complicated question on that and I think we do that a bit later on in the Thoth section, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's quite complicated and stuff. It gets into, you know, what the reality of spirits is. Like, one thought I had the other day is, like, if you were going to play hardcore mode from like a completely like medieval religious point of view, then your soul should have hit points, you know, because that was their perception. You know, you should have like a sin counter or something, and Henry should go to hell, you know, because that was the reality of the psychology they were living under. They really believe those things. And I think sometimes we have a modern perception, and they were all like pretending to believe it, and they're all like modern people living under some kind of medieval superstitious yoke that they don't really believe in. But no, they really believed in it, to the point where, you know, if you go back in time to different like ancient civilizations, you can argue that people had almost entirely different forms of consciousness to the consciousness we have now. You know, so again, what's realism from that point of view is tricky. Hopefully that's not too complicated.
No, that's awesome. It's perfect. Okay, moving on. Another question from Mr. Happy. Who is your favorite character in both games? And if it's Istvan, then who is the second favorite?
Well, this is a tricky one for me to answer, guys. So I kind of like said this the other night maybe, but certainly in the first one, you know, like, because I have to remove Istvan. I really love Istvan as a character, obviously. You know, love him, playing him and everything. He's so much fun in all sorts of different ways. And they gave him this amazing costume, right, in the second one. So that's great, because I love costumes, you know, in theatre. So it's extremely satisfying. And yeah, he's got all these, you know, different angles and takes on him, different directions you can take him. But other than that, then it's obviously Henry, right, which is kind of a bit of an obvious choice, because Henry is you know, and your perception of the game. And then after that, in the first run, it's Radzig, guys.
Radzig.
You know, yeah. I was really convinced by Radzig. I said that the other day. Like, it really moved me, like, the story in terms of his acceptance and, like, you know, the kind of like father issues that were involved there. You know, like, I really got kind of like caught up in that and definitely moved. I think, I can't remember who it was, but somebody was talking about, there's this one scene where kind of Radzig walks Henry out and they kind of overlook the land, and he kind of gives him his like praise really as a father and everything. It's really nice, you know, really played on my heartstrings. And then, you know, as I said, you give it 5 minutes critical thinking, and I'm sorry, Radzig can get in the bin.
Yeah, he's really not a good dad.
but when you're caught up in that the romanticism of the period and the journey and how it must have felt, you know, like yeah, no, it really that father-son relationship, or that redeemed father-son relationship, I think really touched me. And then Lady Stephanie, yeah, I thought she was played exceptionally well. It was extremely funny. And also Godwin from the first one I really liked. But I can't speak for the second one yet. Yeah. Because that again, because I just laughed so much. It was like really, I was cackling.
That's awesome. I just got a question in DMs from Gian, who asks if you could sit across the table from Istvan, across the table, what kind of conversation would unfold? Are there any beliefs or ideas you think you and he might surprisingly agree on?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Istvan's personal trauma far exceeds my own, you know? So I had to go there in imagination. And so it's not, I don't have that, you know, I don't have that level of like personal angst that he has. I'm most interested after the Kingdom Come Twitter stuff, you know, because what's interesting about that is that these themes and strands that you guys have pulled out of the character and like started to take in different directions are thoughts that I had. You know what I mean? They're kind of, not all of them. Some of them are completely unique, but some of them are like, oh no, I went in that direction. I went in this direction. So so that's really interesting. But now I've kind of lost my thread. Just repeat the question for me a little bit.
Okay, I need to find it. If you could sit across from Istvan at a quiet table, what kind of conversation would unfold? And are there any beliefs or ideas you would
Okay,
agree
so where
on?
I'm most interested in Istvan, I think, and this is where I want to kind of explore, I think, when we get to the fan fiction stuff, because this is the stuff we don't know. You know, right? This is the story that the Warhorse hasn't told, and probably never will, right? But it's the bit after the siege of Nicopolis until the events of Kingdom Come 1. That's where I think we might have commonality, because I think in order to become the person he was, there was a period of learning, and I think there was a lot of quite intellectual inquiry, and I think he was driven by his experiences to question things like religious faith and intellectual dogma generally. And I think his journey after Nicopolis had him mixing with cosmopolitan crowd in different ways. Again, we'll go into a bit more depth in that later, and being exposed to like new ideas from his perspective, coming from, you know, effectively kind of a backwater. So I think his eyes are being opened during that time to different, also being corrupted, I think, to some extent by that cosmopolitan lifestyle. You know, like that's where he begins to lose his Henryness, you know what I mean? Like lose, because at the beginning he must have been similar to Henry in some ways, and become more Istvani. But I think those kind of ideas and philosophies I have explored in my life, and I think that we would have a good conversation about what he learned, you know, and what he learned during that time. That's probably where I would go with it. There's that kind of interregnum between Nicopolis and KCD1.
That's very interesting.
It'll probably make a bit more sense later on, that one, I think.
I got another question also in DMs. People are just DMing me. I'm sorry if I don't get to ask all questions, but
Don't worry, I'll carry on talking until I'm exhausted.
All right. So it's a question about your reaction to reading Istvan's death and how he approached it, as it being such a critical point in Henry's story, because it is a big moment.
That's a good one. I mean, like, I really appreciate it because I didn't expect them to do that. You know, I didn't expect them to do that. I thought it was going to go one of two other ways. And so I didn't expect them to do that. And actually, when you I don't want to do too much of your work for you. You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of this stuff should be explored by the fans themselves, and it's your character, and you should take it in the directions that you want to take. But I think his position between the two maps, as I understand it, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to kind of be Istvan to access the other map. Is that true?
That's right.
So therefore, he's this. I kind of suggested this the other day, but again, I didn't really know this. Right, this is what I'm finding out. So some of this stuff is like my reaction to that because I didn't know, exactly how this was going to play out at all. But I think that's very interesting what they've done there, because he then becomes this being between the worlds, right? And this is quite a common concept in European traditions, of philosophies, that there's this, you have to confront something, it's called the dweller on the threshold in some philosophies, or the guardian of the threshold, this kind of thing. So I think he represents that, right? Before Henry can go on to meet the other guy, which I think, again, like, the Mark von Owlet scenes and everything have their own set of questions and are moving in very deep, profound ways and compassionate and all sorts of stuff. Whereas Istvan's a little bit more it's a bit more visceral, isn't it? It's a bit more savage, the Istvan moment, as I see it. So it's more like he's really wrestling with his shadow at that point, before he can go on, before he can kind of move on with the sword redeemed, whatever the sword symbol represents. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think it does. Thank you.
And this is where, it's quite interesting in this use of the tower, as the symbol of this kind of like bridge between the worlds. And that's why that meme, I don't know if you guys remember that meme about hysteric Hansry, the kind of dream rainbow castle, and then the dark lightning castle was hysteric. I think that's it, isn't it? He goes into the dark lightning castle, and he it's no longer the kind of like pastoral comedy of like peasant life. Now you've got to deal with all of that was you kind of recovering yourself, right? And then you have to take that on, and you have to fight your own shadow in the kind of lightning blasted tower. I think the symbolism's pretty clear to me, anyway.
Yeah. There's so many questions. Holy cow. What kind of a question should we do next? Should we stick to?
Yeah, try and stick to anything related to like my approach to the acting or the character first, and then if we do the fan fiction stuff later, because I'm really happy to talk about that with you all. Like, I really think it's very, very fascinating. But if we start talking about vampires and cats and who's shagging who in Rathai, then we might lose our way.
We have a question outside of KCD from Lexion, who can't be here tonight, but if they really want this question answered, they're wondering what motivated you to get a degree in biochemistry and then to teach and then to become an actor, and if this motivation somehow translated into Ishtvans. That's the question.
Well, only okay, kind of. I guess kind of. The acting definitely is part of being a rogue, right? Like being a rogue, you got to be an actor. You got to train at that. And it's not sufficient to have just the gift of the gab and rely on your own wit, in these to get to level 100. You got to have training. And I didn't start I didn't stop acting. You know what I mean? I didn't stop acting to do biochemistry. I was always acting throughout that period. So I started at acting school when I was 11. So I was doing, I don't know, it's like a kind of adjunct to normal school. So I was doing all the normal stuff. And then on top of that, I was doing probably, 6-8 hours of different things dancing, singing, improvisation, straight acting, Shakespeare, you know, and also my teacher was very good and very like British old school. So all of these things kind of come together. You know, as I said to someone else the other day, you kind of need the musical training. I think Tom would certainly agree with that. The musical training is extremely useful for an actor because it creates his vocal range. And then you can translate that into emotions and dialects and all sorts of stuff. So to get that in at a young age is good. But then the problem was, and I think a lot of kids from my background have this exact same situation, that acting is not seen as a serious job. And it's not, and even as, you know, time passes and the gulf between the rich and the poor gets bigger and bigger and bigger, there are far less people from, you know, lower income backgrounds in getting into acting, because it requires you to not work really and wait by the phone for a lot. So I was discouraged from pursuing it any further by teachers and by my parents, and they wanted me to be a doctor. So I went down that line, and then I spent about 3 years, you know, when I was younger, like between 15 and 18, doing a lot of like medical work experience in different areas that were pretty full on. And you know, after getting my hands dirty with that, I guess I realized that it wasn't really for me. It takes a certain type of mind to be a doctor, I think. And I don't know if I was emotionally tough enough to do that. So, but I'd kind of already selected my courses at this point, so I kind of had to pursue science anyway, because that's the way the British system works. And genetics was the most interesting thing kind of on the menu at that point in kind of scientific history, I guess. So that's why I went into biochemistry. And I don't regret it, because I learned an enormous amount of things about the world and organisms and how they work. So it's not something I regret. But I didn't stop acting while I was doing my degree. I was still doing musicals, and I was still doing different theatre experiments. And then when I came out the other side of that and I started teaching, after working in various little bits of scientific, you know, fields for a while and for the government, then I started teaching, and then I just started teaching drama as well. And then that carried on in Prague. So I never really stopped acting or teaching acting really for, I don't know, 30 years, something like that. So how does it inform the character? Like the overlap for me, and I can't speak of canon for this, but the extent to which Istvan is Henry, I certainly played Henry with alchemy. And I have some criticisms and jokes I would make now about the people who choose to do it that way, like alchemy first. But I did the alchemy and the kind of forestry stuff first. And I think Istvan has some either direct parallel where they're learning alchemy, and there's been some great suggestions from the fans about how that would have happened. But if he's like a kind of character going through the same things that Henry went through, then he would have learned alchemy, and he would have had similar kind of justifications for why he wanted to learn alchemy at the beginning, probably to save people, because this is before he's become corrupted. And I think that's why anybody pursues medicine or science, really, maybe with the exception of physics, because they just like blowing stuff up and ripping holes in space-time. Apart from those guys, you know, most of us are in it for the healing. So I think that's the overlap, and then maybe that takes a darker route later for Istvan, I would say. But that's the only commonality that I had in my mind, and I wasn't really, you know, overplaying that. I think there's some interest, as I said, I think there's some interesting things you can take from that in the kind of goth sense and in the Thoth sense. But the fact that I have a scientific background didn't really play into Istvan, other than I think Istvan had to be something of an intellectual.
There was actually a question. I'm trying to find it now. I'm not sure who asked, but it was very not very, but kind of related to this one, and it talked about Istvan's childhood and the events before we actually get to see, but I'm not sure what the question is right now. But
well, if anybody else wants to ask a question before, I mean, I can answer one that I remember. Yeah, go on.
I wanted
go ahead.
to ask something about teaching, right? So, somebody who just started teaching people, I sometimes encounter students struggling, with subject or whatever. And I just wanted to ask you if you also encountered that and how do you help them? Like, in sort of advice, I guess.
I was a great advocate of something called personalized learning. So if you search for something called personalized learning, you'll get a lot of useful material on that. And the other thing that's really worth considering is ways of intelligence, different types of intelligence. And kind of like contemporary teaching turned away from that a little bit. I think they started to find it a little bit gimmicky. But I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think it's Howard Gardner, maybe, if my memory serves me. Howard Gardner, is that right? I can search for it later, but he has various different types of intelligence, which basically means that if you're just talking to a class, you're really only activating one type of intelligence, and therefore you're only really teaching to 15% or something. So I used to introduce songs and various physical activities and like drawing. So you're exploring whatever the topic is through spatial intelligence or through intrapersonal intelligence or through different forms of social intelligence, musical intelligence, logical intelligence. You can do it in all sorts of different ways. And I pioneered at my school a kind of merit system that was based on that to try and reward people for this kind of this type of personalized thinking and personalized approaches. But again, it requires a kind of whole school philosophy, and the school was very supportive of this. But I think in general, there's quite a lot of resistance from teachers who don't necessarily want to change their ways, and so it creates quite a lot of friction, and sometimes these things can be seen as gimmicky. But within your class, there's nothing stopping you from reaching out to different types of intelligence, and even if they don't really exist, right? The kind of net effect of teaching in different ways is that your classes just become more interesting. I would say so. Songs are a good way to start on this. If there's some kind of rote learning where they have to memorize something, then do it through make some kind of song up and get everybody kind of singing and trying to sing, because it again brings a kind of different thought to it. And you can do this in any subject. You can do this in science. You can do this in maths. There's really nothing stopping you from that in lesson planning. But I don't want to talk too much about that now. But another time I can talk a lot about that. I know quite a lot about that stuff.
Thank you so much. I wrote it all down.
Yeah, I think it's Gardner. I think Gardner, Ways of Intelligence or something like that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank all of the teachers. Teachers are fucking awesome. So thank you all to all the teachers that are.
Yeah, it's not an easy job. Congratulations, guys. Well done on surviving so far.
Hey, we have a bunch of new speakers. So hello, everyone.
Hey, can I jump in with a small question?
Absolutely.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Logan, for gracing your evil gang with your presence tonight.
Hey, no problem. Love you guys.
You've already mentioned that a little bit, but I wanted to ask, how did you feel when you realized you had so many fans? Because obviously you play an evil character, so did you expect that? Thank you.
You see, interesting question, isn't it? Because personally, right now, I'm overwhelmed by all of it, and I'm sure Warhorse are, because they're facing tens of thousands of times this kind of production of content and all sorts of different things. And the extent to which the character is popular, even though they are evil, again, is like half the players of this game are evil, right? You know, they're doing some pretty horrible things. You kill every chicken in a village, you've driven that village into potential starvation in this kind of period. You can't do that and expect to, like, you know, judge other characters' morals if you're robbing, you know, farms and stuff. That's not cool. So, but I think what's interesting is that because of the costume, right, and because of that then following the death of Istvan, you're going up to, you know, Eric as well. So you don't really ever escape Istvan. You're kind of living in the shadow of that. Maybe for the rest of the game, really, right? Because the parents kind of bring it up right at the end as well. Yeah, the costume's really attractive. You've created this game where you've got millions of people playing this character who's obsessed with this other guy, right? And you can play Henry in 1,000 different ways. So every Henry's kind of different. But the Istvans, maybe you see different sides of Istvans, but maybe Istvan's got slightly more of a coherent identity. And then you make this whole game about whether you're going to become this person or not become this person. And there are all the kind of moral dilemmas are kind of built around that, I think, or a lot of them. Then it's not surprising that there are a lot of fans for the character, I think. But I personally am surprised. But when I step back from it, I'm like, oh, okay, well, it's a bit like Slim Shady, you know? Like, this character's got the bling, and this character represents, you know, all sorts of the shadier kind of parts, the bad boy kind of aspects. Who's just going to do whatever he wants, you know? So I think that's, then it's not surprising, right? That he's quite popular. And I think they bring in the kind of good bad boys, if I can say it that way, like this pack of guys that you get involved with later on. They're like the other side, right? Well, that doesn't necessarily give you a good bad guy. It just kind of heightens that kind of moral ambivalence, right, of the whole thing, as I understand. But again, you guys have played it much more than me, so you're gonna be able to speak to that better. And if anybody wants to talk, you know, kind of over me or to each other, feel free on these topics. Like, I'm not the master.
I was actually wondering if I could simply join the conversation and kind of keep asking you questions on the matter like I did the last time.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, no problem. No problem. Yeah.
Okay. I will be doing that then. Not now.
I have a small question
yeah, okay.
too.
No stress. Yeah, whenever you like. If you want to ask more, like, go for it. I'm very happy to answer.
Will do.
have kind of a small question too. If you could add anything to Ishtvan's canon or fanon, what would it be and why?
I think it's personally, and again, there's loads of different directions you can take this, so I want to close them off. But I think it's that period after Nicopolis. I think up to Nicopolis is quite clear, right? You know, you can imagine a kind of young, vulnerable Istvan who's experiencing, you know, trauma and going through something similar to Henry, having his house burned down, chasing after his shadow, you know, searching through the forest for mysteries to try and become stronger as a person so he can beat that shadow. And then you see the kind of later Istvan, right, when he's a little bit more corrupt and he's like, you know, I think he still, like, super wants to carry on that quest that he's got to probably reduce the entire Ottoman Empire to dust, right? But he's getting older, he's getting decadent, he's maybe drinking too much wine, you know, maybe half of him is like, yeah, I'll just carve myself out a kingdom and kind of settle down. So I think those two areas of Istvan are very clear to me anyway. But this middle bit, basically, it's the escape from Nicopolis down and what happened there, because that's unclear. And I think it's like, if you tag along with Sigismund that whole way, then that's a really interesting journey. And so that's the bit that the Thoth, basically I call it the Thoth section. Because he's going through these very exotic lands for him, you know, and he's learning, and his brain's probably exploding with different ideas and possibilities, and and ways he can get back at them for Nicopolis. And also, I think is that interesting relationship with the nobility. That generally, I think he has a very, very low respect for nobility because of what happened in Nicopolis and because of what happened before. But I think he does have respect for Sigismund. So the extent to which they were bros, somehow on that journey would be interesting. Or maybe not. And I want to kind of talk a little bit about that later because I want to see what you guys think more. So we do that bit later on, if that's okay. But that's the bit I'd love to see explored. Although I know a lot of people want to see Nicopolis and the kind of the goth section of it. Personally, I'd like to see that's the missing bit. That's the stuff that's most unclear to me and perhaps a bit more intriguing.
Thank you.
I've also I've got a question, which is what what's your interpretation of how Eric felt about Istvan's death? Because in my opinion, I feel like he went kind of mad, but I don't know if that's like really the right wording for it. But I was just interested, like, what your thoughts were about it.
I think really that's a question for Jim. Like in terms of, obviously I'm dead at that point, so I wouldn't have seen. I think Jim's acting's great in that scene. Obviously, it's fantastic. But I think it's really a question for him. Like the extent to which I think his reaction is justified by the work I put into my idea of the relationship with the character, I think it is justified. But I think you have to go down a darker path than maybe some people want to go to really see where that kind of like more visceral kind of fury comes out of him. Because he goes into full beast mode, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought so, but I was glad to ask you if from like a fan of KCD type of position instead of like the actor position. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I can relate to it as an actor, but as a character, he's kind of dead. Like our relationship, I think, was very, very close. Obviously, that's the way it's shown, and so I think that alone can justify, this revengeful kind of like thing that comes out of him. But again, it's almost like a split thing that comes out of him to me, and like with the dog killing and all of this kind of stuff. So I think I'm sure Jim will speak to you at some point, and maybe that's a question for him and his thoughts more on that. I think.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Loud and clear.
Thank you so much, Logan, for taking the time, and everyone else in Evil
No
Gang.
problem.
I'm really interested to know about the collaboration aspect of the project, I guess especially maybe in the first game, because I feel like we get more face time with the actual character. So were there any moments where you felt that, something could be like nudged one way or the other based on, getting, I guess, in character versus just sticking exactly to what the script calls for, if that makes sense?
Maybe. Do you mind elaborating a little bit on that, just so I don't answer completely the wrong question?
Yeah, no worries. Like, if you felt that, the direction of like a scene or something was maybe, if you felt that you could improve on like the direction, I guess, or if you maybe felt that something, like, I don't know if he would do that or think
Well,
that.
I mean, honestly, it's just a very, very different experience from their point of view, managing a project like this, because it's kind of like a Manhattan project, right? So it's very different from a play, like I said last time. So you don't necessarily get again, I don't know what people imagine happens in TV production and game production and stuff, but it's not the same as theatre. So it really requires quite a lot of work. And then the director also has to shape that in a slightly different way because you're kind of compartmentalized, if you will. and you as the actor don't know everything that they're going to then go and do with it afterwards, right? You're kind of just in that light pursuit. So you have imagination, right? And so if an actor, I'm just speaking as a director myself, if an actor is bringing imagination to a role and that they've done work on the character then it's always deeper, right? There's always different kind of textures and layers to it if that person does work on it than if they don't. And if they don't, in my experience, and this is also true in TV and film, and the actor gives you like a very flat reading, right, of the line, right? You know, they've not really experimented with it much. You as the director don't necessarily have that much time to solve that. So really, a lot of these problems have to be preempted in casting. So you want to cast. You either want to cast to type. So you're casting someone who's going to play themselves, right? And you're casting it's like the star approach, right? Where you're just kind of expecting somebody to play themselves and you're casting them for that. And then they can play themselves really well. They can play themselves in all sorts of different ways and give you depth. But then if you're trying to cast for a specific character and the actor is bringing, you know, the wrong variation to the casting, then you might not select them. You might select somebody else who's closer to your reading of it. But then the amount of time you have to work with that character and actor is not very much generally. It's much less than you think. So you have to be really quick. So the collaboration that happens is often really in the space itself, in this kind of filming space, you know, well, from the actor's point of view, whatever the directors and writers and people have kind of got behind the scenes, you don't know. But so when you're trying to tip it in one way or the other, I'm pretty good. I will do what I'm told to do, you know, as an actor. And I don't think Warhorse would deny that. You know, like I do whatever I'm told to do on stage. And normally, in my experience, like they liked the character, they liked the direction I put it, like the different lines and so on. And often it was just about maybe reining in some of my theatrics. You know, I think that's a lot of it. I think we had a good dynamic with the character. I think they enjoyed what I was bringing, and then they would be dialing down theatrics. But I don't know when they did the final cut, because they have like many different takes of this, whether they're going to use the one with the kind of the most deadpan reading, you know, the less inflected one or the more inflected one. You don't know. So I don't know where if the director changed something, they may not have kept that version anyway. They may have kept something that I did earlier. I don't know. Sorry, I can't be more specific than that. I think that's about as much as I can say. It's very dynamic. I think that's probably the takeaway from it. It's very dynamic. It's nobody's like, you don't have the time. You don't have the, it's just reality. But it makes everything really, really, really intense and really interesting. And the focus at Warhorse was really good. You know, like we worked really hard when we were in the studio. Everyone was focused. Everyone switched on. Everyone's paying attention. You can see that in the motion capture videos, how good the direction is and how involved the directors are. I think they did an amazing job. But the reality of producing like that is that your time and contact time is quite limited, and you don't necessarily, the actor doesn't have an oversight that they would have in a play.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And not to go back to what we were talking about earlier.
Real quick, Ray,
Okay.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
You're fine. Yeah, you're fine.
First of all, Chris, thank you so much for hosting. It's really fun. I'm having a time of my life. Many people feel the same.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that we already have gotten like many questions from many people here. And I think, and many others agree, that we should work on those first, and maybe you guys could like remember your questions and then later on ask them afterwards. I think that would be a lot easier also for Chris and just like the overall plan of this thing, because again, I think there's a plan here. So maybe you could like keep this just for now, and then ask
Stick
later.
to the plan.
Yes.
Yes,
For now.
exactly. We should probably stick to the Thank you.
We should probably definitely stick to the plan.
Absolutely.
No. No.
That's what we said to the French, damn it.
The French.
And they were like,
Yeah.
sod your plan.
It's always the French. It's always
Blame the French.
It literally is.
Exactly.
It was
Yeah.
specifically the
Yeah.
French in this situation, though.
As a Pole, I also have some beef with the French, so it's always the French.
I absolutely
100%.
agree.
There's no French in this space.
Well, lucky for them.
I'm joking. Yeah. Should we move on to the next section then?
The only thing I wanted to add was when we were talking about Sigismund
By all
earlier, this is just a historical thing, which actually I guess it's not that historical. They say it in game. But the reason people were so upset with Wenceslas in the first place was because the nobles were seizing as much power as they did. The whole thing with Sigismund was he was going to like reel in the nobles and yeah.
I'm sorry, Dan. Is there a problem? I can hear you trying to speak.
Oh, I just thought there was connection lost between everybody.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, okay then.
We got it.
You got
Was there a question there, though, about Sigismund, or?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Sorry, sure. Wait, me or someone else?
No, Ray. Did you have a question?
I'll shut up now. Sorry.
Oh, wait, did my
Or were
whole
you
thing
just,
cut
were you just
out?
adding?
Wait.
I'm not sure.
Oh, that's
if you,
so
if
sad.
you
I
have a
just said a
question,
whole
just
thing
repeat
about.
it. Let's keep it going.
Yeah,
Let's
I
keep
just
it going.
said. Yeah, the only thing I was saying was that the whole reason people were upset with Wenceslas really was because the nobles were seizing so much power because they saw that he was just an idle king, and the whole thing with Sigismund was he was going to reel in the nobles. So I can see that as another reason that István would respect him way more than he would respect Wenceslas. That's all.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're robber barons. They're literally robber barons, you know. And I think you often, well, one of the things that seems to be happening is people are judging the lives of KCD characters by modern standards, which is kind of like you can go down that road and everything, but if you're going to do that, like a kind of left-wing view of the village system back in that time was that they were basically like work camps, but held by gangsters that were forcing you to grow corn because that was the sellable crop on the market. So these people were kind of like slaves of like bandit kings. And did things improve if there was like a unifying monarch like Sigismund? Well, maybe in order to maximize the money that went to the crown. But I think Istvan will have seen that chaos, right, in Europe as weakness against the Turks. Is that right, or did?
Yeah, that's all. That's the only thing I
Okay.
wanted to go back to that because
all right,
I love
cool.
history.
Awesome. Okay, we should move on.
Okay, there was definitely, in terms of acting, there was definitely a question earlier about the extent to which I know these actors in Prague. I remember it from the list, so I can answer that quickly, unless you want to move on.
Please answer all the questions you want.
Yeah, so I have a lot of experience working with the actors in KCD, like probably a lot of them from KCD 1, less so in KCD 2, because they brought in, different European actors and different people from England and so on. So I didn't know those people, although they were really good fun to work with when I worked with them. But people like Jim and Victoria, and who else? Maybe the guy who plays Jobst, the guy who plays Hanush, right? I know these actors well, or Radzig, right? I've acted with them many times on stages in different roles, and I've also directed them myself for many years, like in different plays. Like I directed, I think 2 plays with Victoria, and I was in one with her, and who else? Like Jim, obviously. Jim, 6 plays. My voice is echoing. I'm just gonna turn it off again.
I think it was, yeah, I think it should be fixed now.
Yeah, let's try it. Okay. Yeah. So I know all of these people pretty well, and I work with Jim a great deal. Like Jim was my Mephistopheles to Dr. Faustus twice, and we did all sorts of plays, and we've done lots of different statuses between us, you know, whether I was high status or he was high status, or whether we were bros, you know, or whether we were enemies. And, you know, we've covered a lot of those different types of relationships. So we knew each other well when we were doing that. So a lot of that kind of emotional connection that you sensed, I think that was the question anyway, is genuine, you know, like we've spilled a lot of blood together on stage and so on. So that, yes, it does inform the reality, that kind of familiarity, I think. And you also know what you're going to get out of the person with them in the space more than you do with a stranger, right? Like, I'm very used to acting with Jim, and Jim's very used to acting with me, and Michael Piffin as well. So it's good that the 3 of us got quite a lot of time together in the game. That's probably the answer to that question. If you want to move on.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the list again. What kind of a question should we do now? Should we do the philosophical stuff, maybe?
Well, if anybody's got anything else relating to the acting and the method or any of those kind of things, then let's do that, and then we move on to the kind of fan fiction as I see it.
Does anybody have anything?
If anybody wants to cut in now who didn't pre-book a question, now is the time to do it. If it relates to that topic, if that's cool.
I could actually. We can switch up the speakers because there's a bunch of requests. So I'm just gonna.
Yeah, you can take me off if you need to clear up some space.
Me too.
All right.
I can always request again later.
True.
And then I'm gonna vanish in 20 minutes anyway, so.
Okay. So many people. Thank you all for joining.
Just
honestly.
a quick question: like, did you do audition for Ishtvan specifically, or like how did it work?
Yeah, I auditioned specifically for Istvan, if I remember, and it went well. And there was some kind of like problem. It was nothing to do with me. It was to do with the casting process. I had no idea the details of that, but I ended up keeping the part of Istvan after this whatever happened. And yeah, it was great. I mean, like Dan's great. You know, like the whole team, really good fun. Great laugh, and we had a good laugh about the character before we started. We had a good meeting about it, and we went quite into it. I mean, like, I'm not going to tell you all that stuff, but that was a lot of fun. So I was made to feel very comfortable, and they were really happy to play, and they were having as much fun with Istvan as I was. So it was a lot of like collegiate evil. It was very good. And yeah, but yeah, it was an audition. It was a casting, and it came as a result of my connection, you know, to the scene.
Thank you. I would actually kill for the audition tape.
I hope they burned it.
Okay, we have a question from Lady Harriet, who is a KCD streamer, and she's asking, well, we talked about you possibly doing a hardcore stream playthrough, but would you actually be willing to do that?
Yes, I'm willing to do that. I just I have to set up a computer. I'm not. I'm a bit. My tech skills are very, very limited, guys. I was a bit of a dump stat for me. Like, I'm not very good with with computers and all the technology and stuff. So it might take a little bit of time for me to just get comfortable with the system, because I don't like it when technology like fails on me in the middle of something that I'm doing. So I'm very happy to do that. It will happen. It may be a month. I would say a month kind of maximum. I need some advice to set up the computer systems and stuff. I don't mind, like buying it and so on, but like I just need a bit of advice to know how to start, like Twitch streaming and this kind of thing. I'm a gamer. There's no problem with like playing the games themselves, but it's the other stuff. It's the kind of again, I don't even know the right questions to ask because I'm so out of the loop on that kind of thing. But we will somehow solve that problem. If any of you can help me, that's fine. I'm very happy to receive technical support.
I can help with streaming if you need help. Yeah, with setting up. I have some experience.
Great, fantastic. Okay, all right. We'll get in touch then.
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Okay. Let's move on then to the next section because we're like way over time. So many questions. Does anybody here who is a speaker have a question? Or anybody in chat?
Like if we're already on the like philosophical topics, I think I do, but like I'm not sure if we've moved on or
Yeah, ask your thing. I think we can.
Okay, so like I wanted to ask something about like the Ishtvan's philosophy about the revenge, because someone here asked about Eric's reaction to Istvan's death, but I was wondering, like Logan, what do you think Ishtvan's reaction would be if he knew what happened with Eric after he died? Like meaning that he went for the revenge, and like Ishtvan obviously already been kind of against it, like I mean not against it, but thinking it's like useless right now. So yeah, like something like this.
Oh damn it. I think that moment when he's saying, look man, revenge is pointless, you can't, what does he say, something like you can't fuck it, you can't eat it.
Yeah.
I think he literally says that, right? He's roguing him, like he believes it, but he's roguing him. So if the situation was reversed and he killed Eric, I think Istvan would obliterate Henry. And just obliterate him, just like horrifically murder him. I think in the same way that, I don't think there's anything. I think any ideas that Istvan had about courting Henry in various different ways would fly out of the window, and he would just brutally murder him.
Fly out of the window.
Lol. Yeah. Sorry. Too soon.
Yeah, like that's very good to know, because I know some people were like thinking he might be kind of disappointed in Eric for this, but like I didn't think so, and I know some people didn't think so. So it was interesting to like actually know what you think about this. So thank you.
Well, I think that's a slightly different point. I mean, like, I don't think he would have necessarily been happy that Eric flew into revenge and squandered everything to get revenge for Istvan. I think he probably would have, the softer Istvan would have wanted him to look after himself, put it behind him, move on, and accept that war is a nasty business and shit happens, and try and carve out, a nice little beachside resort for himself in Romania or whatever. Like, I don't think he would have wanted that. I'm just saying that if the situation was reversed, I think Istvan wouldn't have gone, oh, well, revenge is pointless, I won't bother, avenging Eric's death. I think he would have immediately been triggered into an insane fury in the same way.
Yeah, it's like different if it like happens to you versus, you know, somebody you care about.
Exactly. Because he's the parent, isn't he, in that relationship, kind of, or the kind of like adjunct parent.
He's the daddy.
Yes, he's the daddy. yes. In the darkest possible way, Patricia. Thank you very much. War. Okay,
but staying on that question,
okay.
I think that Ishtvan wouldn't necessarily expect Eric to actually, kill Henry and kind of get any kind of revenge for him. But I still think he would expect him to kind of continue living the way he taught him to, like, to still achieve power, to be better, to be that best dog who fucks the bitches, Like, I genuinely believe that it was like kind of his way of taking care of those who he thought went through the same as he did. And I think that it was his only way to kind of get a hold of your life back, to kind of get that power back into your own hands.
Oh, yeah.
I think in a way, Ishtvan kind of knew that would be the last time he saw Eric. And he obviously, the parting message that he says, you still need to learn to fight for your place in the sun. I think, going on to what Patricia just said, he did not expect him necessarily, but really hope that he would continue down this way that Istvan taught him.
Okay, I think just to speak to that, I think yes, half and half kind of thing. Because I think there's two demons wrestling inside Istvan at that point. And I think that's why I love that art so much, when he's, the reflection of him through time, he's looking out the window. Because that's the best way of putting this. It's mission first. You know what I mean? Like, or the extent to which it is mission first, and whether it's me first, right? And I think there's a lot of Istvan that's mission first, and that there's a lot of Eric, because of that, is also mission first, right? So when he's saying you've got to carve yourself up, you've got to get something for yourself out of this, that's the kind of me first philosophy of Istvan that's coming out. But it's in conflict with this mission first, because it's like back to when I said at the beginning of the interview. In the kind of grand scheme of things, his kind of super objective of maximum revenge would be to destroy the entire Ottoman Empire. Because it's like when the vision comes to him later. Where are you going to stop? Who are you going to sacrifice next? How long are you going to carry on with this revenge mission? This is the same thing, or a bit like Arya Stark. Like where are you going to stop this revenge? How many people are you going to kill? When will you stop? And he's already had that kind of experience of massive defeat in Nicopolis. So then this kind of me first philosophy is rising in conflict with that. And I see the me first philosophy as the one that's kind of corrupting him. That's the one with the wine. That's the one where, he just wants Eric to have his own place in the sun, his own beach resort, drinking cocktails, rather than he's like, Europe be damned kind of thing. But then that other half of him is like, the security of Europe is paramount. That makes sense. So there's two things going on there. But in that whole scene, there's quite a lot of different. I can see why it's popular, because it's very rich, that scene, in different ways. That's what I think, anyway.
Yeah, you can really see how conflicted Ishtvan is about a lot of the things he's feeling and a lot of things he's trying to do.
Yeah, and the things that he said to Eric up until that point. Is he trying to unsay some things that he said?
Yes, definitely.
How far has he pushed him on the mission? Because Eric seems to be more mission committed than me first, and that's why he's kind of in those other orbits as well, with the with the higher ups, you know, that they keep him.
But isn't it like Eric is so focused on the mission? Isn't it only because Istvan has taught him to be like this? Like, isn't
Yeah,
it
that's what I'm saying.
simply
Yeah,
because it's Istvan's objective in all of this? And like Istvan is the very well, he's the engine of everything that Eric does.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's why I think he's trying to unsay some things that he said to him before. Because he's kind of programmed him right into that mission somehow or another, and he's trying to say, no, maybe I was wrong. You know, like that's why there's so much kind of emotion and frailty and vulnerability in that scene. And then when he's looking out the tower as well, you know, he's reflecting on himself and where he's got to and how the fuck is he here? You know, like how many people has he killed? What has he done? You know, he's probably in the depths of a pit of anxiety. If there's anything to read from that scene with Eric before he goes up to the tower, I think he's like in quite deep turmoil. You know, when Henry comes upon him, and I think one of the reasons why he is in such deep turmoil is because he just tortured Henry. And I don't think he really appreciated torturing Henry personally. I think there's a lot of like he's holding a lot back. He doesn't hurt him that much. He keeps like trying to give him a way out. You know, like I think that there's a lot of like he's being very matter of fact about it a lot of the time. After the starting, when he's like, "Oh, you'll sing like a bird," you know, in this kind of acting thing, he's quite impatient with it. He's quite matter of fact with it. He wants to get it over. I don't think he's enjoying it that much. You know, like
so it was. So most of it was just like a performance.
I think that's where where he gets theatrical and he starts going, "Oh, he'll sing like the night." That's the kind of roguing in. But as the scene progresses, I mean, I've watched a few different variations of that, and obviously exists in some kind of meta thing. So. But I feel that Istvan's quite conflicted through that. He's kind of trying to get through it. He wants to get it done. He doesn't really want to, you know, mess Henry up too badly.
He's pretty. I mean, he goes pretty easy on him for how much.
I think he goes pretty easy on him. Yeah,
shit.
yeah, seriously, because he could have just like, you know, like. Cut a finger off or anything, you know, at that moment. He was so like open if he really wanted to get revenge on him. And also I think there's an element that because my I don't want to go too much into this, but my brother-in-law's like a master interrogator. He was a master interrogator with the police, so like maximum like interrogation training, you know, like so he's like very, very good at exactly what Istvan's doing in that moment. And I don't know. I mean, again, maybe I haven't watched enough, but is there an argument that he's actually trying to break one of the other two with Henry? He's not actually interested in Henry. He's trying to break Godwin or Zizka by what he's doing to Henry.
Yeah, he kind of like plays on like hurting Henry more, and then Godwin is like, oh God, no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because he knows Godwin's going to break at some point, right?
Doesn't Istvan say after that it's like, oh, I almost felt sorry for the bastard?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He feels exhausted.
Yeah, it's knackered him. It's psychically traumatized him. He did not want to do that. He kind of likes Henry. He's kind of had compassion with Henry from the beginning. He's always kind of letting him go. He's always kind of giving him another chance. He's always trying to get him to see the kind of moral of the story, right? Which is that, you know, war is a nasty business and things get ambiguous.
He seems a bit kind of demystified in a second game. In the first game, there was more mysticism about him, but like in the second game, he just looks exhausted. There's just too much at stake.
I think so. I think that's it. I think, and that's why he kind of like maybe knows he's doomed, you know, and that you can see that in the eyes. He's just like sensed that he's ran out of road here, that he can't keep justifying what he's doing to himself. He can't keep justifying what he's doing to people, you know, because it's okay to justify something when you have got that kind of like mega spirit of revenge driving you, right? Because you always attribute it to the revenge, but once you've got this grand distance from the revenge, you know, you like that dream of destroying the Ottoman Empire is so far away from him, right? And you know, maybe just you know, it catches up with you. How long has he been at war in his whole life?
Yeah,
Right,
basically
one
he
way or
cannot
the
catch a
other.
break. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
And that's probably why he like with Eric, he doesn't want like he's starting to realize maybe he doesn't want Eric to end up like he's ending up.
yeah, exactly that. Yeah, and I think he's trying to like take something back in that conversation with Eric personally, like unsay some things, deprogram him maybe.
Because I think it does
Undo all the
come
hard
from
Even
work.
a genuine place
even
of
as
care for Eric.
even as he like faces down Henry, whom he knows is gonna kill him, then he's still trying to teach Henry if the player takes the kind of long route and talks to him. He's still trying.
Oh yeah, I love that bit. I mean, I made this little video before as it was going on the game, and I think if you have that conversation with Istvan and you really get into it, it really questions everything you've done up to that point. Like it really even like, yeah, I mean, it's so genuine, and it is like, oh no, God. And as you get further in that conversation, like lots of people have said this, you know, you want to kill Istvan less. You know, he actually is kind of shifting your mind. And then the way I was playing that was always like, as an actor, I can be really, really earnest when maybe I feel nothing, you know? So to keep it ambiguous, because there's like a charisma check, there's like speech checks during that scene, right? So there's like a kind of Rogoth, there's like a charisma battle that's going on a little bit with that. And then if you win, I think he gets vulnerable and then he starts talking about Eric or something. I think you win a speech check or something, and then he kind of opens up more. So that then is played as like a defeat of the skills. So if it's a defeat of the skills, then it should be seen as like him being really truthful. And if it's not, then it's to some extent he's, I think, manipulating you, right? He's yeah, go on.
Sorry, I just wanted to point out that every time there is like a small chance that something might happen to Eric, Ishtvan is always like losing it, like totally losing it. He will not have it. Like if he can prevent it, he will go for it, like all for it, so nothing would happen to Eric. Like remember the Talmberg siege? Like when Istvan knew that you have Eric and you hold him hostage, he lost it. Like he kept yelling that you cannot do anything to him. Like not a single hair can fall from his head, you know? And that happens every single time. Like he's just like so vulnerable every time something might happen to Eric. It's absolutely amazing to see this shift.
Yeah, I mean it's his weak spot, but then at the same time, if it's such a weak spot, then why does he trust him with all of these missions? You know, so that in itself,
why did he send him out?
Because he sends him out, right? He sends him out he risks him, right? He risks that, and he hasn't actually. A lot of the stuff that happens up until that point is kind of like strategic moves, as I understand it. So it's only really that moment where he sends Eric out that he actually exposes his vulnerability with Eric. And then his own like normal strategy of like kidnapping people and ransoming them is turned back upon him. And that's how they get it.
Yeah, because for all Ishtvan could have known at that point, once like Eric was, I don't know if Eric was ever in Talmberg or if he was outside or whatever, however it worked, Eric just could have been dead like the whole time, and Ishtvan wouldn't have known until that point where he comes up and he's a hostage.
Yeah, exactly. So he has a lot of faith in this guy, right? Like if you know, like the mission is critical enough to require him to send Eric.
Also, if you lose that speed check in the tower in Trotsky, then Istvan goes straight for the attack. Like he has something like you will never separate us or something when you threaten Eric, and then go straight for the attack, and he just basically 1 or 2 shots the player. Or at least he one shot me, so that might be skill issue.
Sorry about that, and sorry to everyone here tonight that I have killed.
I cheated, so sorry.
Nice.
Not me. I was way over leveled, and then I was kind of sad. I was like,
Yeah,
no!
you finished me off too quick, right? 2 hits.
Not only killed, but also called me some names like a wanker or something in the end. So
Yeah.
Great.
just adding something.
You wanker! You
Deserved.
wanker!
But yeah, coming back to the topic, are there any other questions? There are some people I think.
I wanted to follow up with a question about what if and Ishtvan being tired from all of it catching up to him. It's a little bit of what if, like what if he survived that insane fall? Like, would it break him completely? Like, oh, whoa, I died. Hello, I almost died. Right? Like, how would he feel then? Do you think?
Well, I mean, personally, he looks pretty dead to me. But I think maybe
survive.
Yeah. Okay. I imagine, right? I mean, I don't know. I've played out a few different scenarios in my head, and there's lots of different ways you could take it if you wanted to do that. But it seems to be most interesting to me is when a villain gets a chance to redeem themselves, and it's almost, if you want to be dark with that. If you want to be super dark with that, you can let a character almost redeem themselves and take away their redemption, and deepen their damnation if you want to be really cruel to a character. So
yeah, I like that.
I think if he'd survived, then he'd be pretty battered, and I think that he would go into a period of reflection, and I think probably attempt to return to his roots. I think to attempt to find the boy he was, to try and where that original innocence went, where it came from, try and move on from that. And I think in the medieval times that probably would have been in a monastery. I think.
I like to think. I like to think that one of his goals, what he did, all of that war, was to gain his home back because he lost it long time ago, and maybe he would wonder if he can get it back, because he speaks about how he wants his own realm, right? Maybe it's because he wants the safety of his own walls, right? Maybe. Yeah, to protect Eric too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite. I think his land was pretty secure, right, at the time. That wasn't the land under attack. That was a little bit deeper into the away from the front, right? Or how close was it to the front? Was that a Turkish raid that hit him, or was it at the front line at that point, his home? I think it's more of a raid, wasn't it?
I think it was a raid, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a raid. So to get some distance away from that, right? If you're going for the me first thing, I want my home back for me. I'm no longer mission first. I'm no longer going to sacrifice everything for the Empire, right? I'm going to put me first. I want my own home again. Then I'd want some distance from the Turks. I wouldn't want my new home to be on the border. So I think that would make Bohemia very attractive. And I think on the me first kind of thing, if he came back and he ended up being able to pursue what he really wanted, I think that the me first thing probably would have been quite happy with the Sasau region. And again, it comes back to him being tired. I mean, it's Crusade is absolutely exhausting. I was trying to work out how long it would have taken them to actually get back from that, because he gets to go out onto the Black Sea. There's some kind of harrowing escape there. And he's trapped in Constantinople for quite a while, I think, trying to like bargain with people. And then he goes out by sea. So he's going to have to sail all the way around Greece and then up into like Slovenia or something to get back. Crazy route.
I just have a quick question before Chris takes back over. There's been a lot of mentions here of like revenge and kind of epic journeys. Hard not to compare it kind of to Homerotic themes of like the Iliad and the Odyssey. Do you think any of those type of more historical themes and perhaps ancient history are applicable to the story of just KCD in general? Maybe Henry's in specific, but you're looking at kind of epic tales, revenge and thing, and it's hard not to compare some characters and relationships from
Yeah, I mean,
Homer's works
I wouldn't
to
stop any. I wouldn't suggest you stop any of those lines of inquiry. I think they're really interesting from a literary kind of studies point of view. And like, I've seen a lot of kind of Lancelot. No, isn't there some with the Hansry? Isn't there some focus on is it Lancelot and Galahad?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
They talked about it in the game.
Yeah, I think that stuff's kind of folded into it, personally. And that homoerotic thing as well. I mean, again, this is kind of a very recent thought because I've obviously been coming back to my thoughts on this. But, you know, in that homoeroticism is often true in any war situation, right? Where the men are stationed together. And
not just war, you know, all it takes is just a station or like literally one building with a really high fence, and that's all it takes. You know, they just need like a month.
Yeah.
And I'm not I'm not imagining it. It's not like I wish they were doing this. It was some time ago. I actually spoke to some guy who actually like served because he had to, and he was there like a year or something. And yeah, he actually told me that like this is like, you know, your wife is away. You cannot see her for well, many months. So you kind of have to think of something, you know, and it's nothing weird. Everyone knows it's happening, but nobody speaks about it, you know.
Yeah, and I mean this is also
does
true in the Navy, right? Because you're away for even longer, and that's why the Navy has a reputation for this kind of activity. But like, yeah, if you want to explore that through different you know, epic sagas and so on, I think that's absolutely fantastic for the franchise. As I said, I think if you play it you don't have to, but if you play it that kind of Hansry route, whatever your personal sexuality is, then you're going to get like a deeper experience of the literature because of these parallels that seem to exist there. And in the same way you would get like, you know, like a great experience from reading the Iliad, as you've said, you know, like you should be open-minded to this kind of stuff. And if you've got a liberal education, then, you know, I'm not quite sure what you're asking. I think if those lines of inquiry are valid, yes, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. I just wanted to ask that quickly before Chris took back over. Thank you very much.
No problem. My pleasure.
All right. I think we can continue with the pre-prepared questions.
No, I still have the one philosophical one, please.
Sure.
Okay, great. I have a question that is pretty short, but I need to elaborate a bit more. So Logan would understand what I have in mind specifically. So the question is Istvan evil? That's the question. Now, where I'm coming from is we live in a society that doesn't really care about your upbringing. And I believe it's always been like this. I mean, of course, like the European civilization, like the Latin. We live in a society that doesn't care about you if you've been through some kind of trauma, if your upbringing has been full of evil things, you've experienced some horrible things, more or less. It doesn't matter how bad, how many times it happened. Usually there are many people, especially adults, who know there is something going on in your life when you're a kid, but no one does anything. No one feels responsible for taking care of you or anything like that. Nobody reports it anywhere. And even if they do, there's hardly anything going on about it anyway. So when Istvan or Henry or Eric or any other war orphan is growing up in this kind of environment that basically requires you to be a good little lad, who's agreeable, who is always up to, helping his neighbor, his mom, his dad. But how can this little boy or a teenager or a young adult be a good little lad if he was growing up in such evil circumstances, and there was probably very few people who would look after him to make sure he's doing okay. He has, food to eat, bed to sleep in, and so on. So when he grows up, knowing that, everyone expects you to be a good man, but nobody cares what you've been through. Nobody cares about your trauma. Nobody cares where you're coming from. Nobody cares why you're doing the things you're doing. Why do you behave this way or another? And that's not always a good way to be, but, you're just trying to survive. You're doing you. You're doing what you believe will probably be the best for you, because you know that the world is not a good place, because you've been through so much shit and there was so many people around you that knew and they did nothing. So, is Ishtvan evil?
Right. In the context of that, then if the philosophy of the game is war is a nasty business and people have to do what they have to do in war, and brutal things happen, and that the person who does them is not always responsible for the evil in an absolute sense, because they were just doing what was right at the time to save their men or save the village or whatever the objective was. It was localized. Then no, Istvan's never evil, right? Nor is Henry in that sense. If you're just on the plot, not whatever the players massacring chickens. Forget those guys for a minute. But they're all in a morally ambiguous grey world of shifting political loyalties. You can only justify good or evil if you have an absolute idea of what good is, right? So, and I think maybe differently to Warhorse that you can do that, right? But I think the only way that you can do that I don't know what Warhorse's actual perspective was, but is a kind of Buddhism kind of approach, because the problem of Kingdom Come is kind of like the Bhagavad Gita a little bit, isn't it? There's two different sides fighting. You kind of have to fight for what you believe in, and there's going to be horrible things happening, but you kind of have to do it because it's your duty, right? That's the Bhagavad Gita, your dharma, right? You have to do it. And
I mean, that's basically what happens if you if you have some values in life, if you have some priorities, there will always be someone who suffers because of that, someone who gets hurt, or
Yeah. In the same way,
something
you
getting
can't walk
lost
around
away.
without stepping on ants. You know, you're going to do some damage that's existing in the world. But there is the Buddhist answer to that problem, right? Is minimizing harm. Now, if we bring that back to the game, right? You're in this brutal situation. You've got various brutal choices that you've got to make. Which one is the minimum harm, right? Would be you're always trying to reduce your evil. You're not actually being maximally evil. And that's where I think Istvan is an interesting character, because I don't think he's being maximally evil. I think he's exercising considerable restraint a lot of the times. If he was full-on Joker, if he was a full-on Joker type figure, which he pretends to be at various points, don't get me wrong, he pretends to be chaotic evil, if you like.
He pretends to be a sociopath, doesn't he?
He pretends to be a sociopath because they've got to believe that he's going to cut a throat, you know, or whatever he's going to threaten them to. They've got to believe it. So he acts like that. But I don't think he is like that, because you see that he's not like that when you see the other side of him, right? So I think he's always trying to minimize harm, actually. And I think what was happening, in fact, either way you read this, when he was going into Skalitz at the beginning, right? He's either trying to minimize harm for his soldiers, right? Or he's trying to minimize harm to the village. We're not quite sure, you know? I think his experience of warfare is so brutal that he's actually trying to avoid it. But when it becomes necessary, he does it with full 100% to get it finished as quickly as possible. And in that way, he's quite efficient. But I don't think he's necessarily like, I'm just enjoying like kind of evil torturing. And that's why I think he's maybe, especially in KCD2, I think more in KCD2 and KCD1, he's like, he's actually trying to get Henry to like choose the path that's of minimum harm. And he's always, and he's not just like chopping pieces off Henry because he can. He's always trying to like minimize the damage he does to him, I think, because his compassion for him is so strong. And that's where I think it connects to. I don't want to go too far down this, guys. Going to turn the villain into a complete, you know, like kind of a Christ figure here. But obviously, no. But there is that element of like Christianity in there as well. In that, like, but not pursuing revenge, of forgiving the guy that's trying to kill you, of having compassion for the guy that's trying to kill you. And he keeps kind of trying to reach out to him in those ways. So I don't know. The war is a nasty business thing. For me, is this kind of like facade that he has to put on because that's what the dogs are all like. And they will massacre people, and they will, you know, the kind of psychopaths you're hanging around with. I think maybe this is not completely spurious tangent here, but I think in Chaucer, right? Like Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, he kind of like pillories or did some sarcastic poetry about the different kind of medieval archetypes. And I think one of them is the Crusader. If somebody knows literature better than me, correct me. But I think he kind of suggests the Crusader is like not really a holy figure, but like a bloodthirsty maniac, right? And so a lot of these people that he was hanging around with, you know, like these French knights in Nicopolis, they're just maniacs. He's just like, you're crazy, man. You're crazy. You know? So I think that's what he had to have a bit of a distance on that. But so the goodness in Istvan is the extent to which he's aligned with anything compassionate or anything to do with like the reduction of harm, which I think you do see in different ways. And then I think good or evil, you've kind of answered it, Patricia. It's like it becomes so ambiguous, you can't really say he's evil. That's kind of one of the plot points, I think.
Okay, so I have another question based on that.
I'm sorry, but can I interject a little here, because it's for this one, that it's really interesting to see Logan talking about Ishtvan's reduction of harm, because from like maybe I see it from a professional lens because I specialize in trialing war crimes, but Ishtvan's pulling a lot of checkpoints that we go through in a court session, or we learn about in a meeting where we try to decide if something was justified or not. And a lot of times, even if it would be, even at that time, considered a war crime, you can somehow see why he did what he did. So I think it's from the beginning, even from a legal professional lens, it's really interesting to see how the character plays on it, how he pulls actual valid points that could be brought up in a court of law.
Yeah. And I don't think he's being completely litigious here. I think he's genuinely trying to reduce harm. I think for me, the biggest war crime he does is Merhied. Like he poisons a village, right?
Yeah, he does.
Now, again, I'm not quite sure how many people are dead in that. I remember because it was a long time ago I played it, but I remember following around finding the body by the stream, I think, and you have to kind of find the source of the poison and stuff. But again, that kind of strategy, if you like, is the same as like dropping poison gas on like a town or something like this, right? And we don't know the ins and outs of that. So on the surface, it's purely like, this is horrific. But he may have like told everybody that he's done it and just caused chaos, right? I mean, I'm not saying he didn't do it. He did do it. But like that chaos that he caused in that area might have reduced harm later on, right? And that's the brutal analysis that happens in war when you're trying to do a kind of just war. Again, modern standards
I don't
are very
know.
different
Like
from
his
what the
poisoned
standards were back
water.
then.
Maybe you should like let Logan speak first and then
Sorry.
continue.
I don't mind anyone interjecting. I might need to take a short break in a moment, guys. But the modern definition of a war crime is significantly evolved from the just war concept of like Catholicism, and even the just war in Catholicism, I don't know how much it applied to the other in the sense of Islam and so on, how Islam different rules for infidels and different rules for, people of the faith and all of this kind of thing. I don't know. So I can't really give you a really good answer on that. But yeah, I'm sure. I'm not saying he didn't do. I'm not saying he didn't do war crimes. He did do war crimes. Definitely did war crimes. But it's exactly the same problem that Henry faces later in the game, as I understand it, where he's trying to decide whether to do a war crime to kind of save his own guys or not to do a war crime, and then you're losing your own men. Men that you're like possibly sleeping with.
Yeah.
All right. On that note, I need to take a 5-minute break, if that's all right, guys.
All right, we can totally take a break.
We will mingle
okay.
in the meantime.
So that's 5 minutes. People can talk amongst themselves if they want. Thank you very much.
I would like to say that it is funny when Mark Fart says he wants to spare the people of Nebakov, and Ishtvan seems upset with that.
Yeah, that's really funny. The side eye he gives him.
Definite side eye.
Was it Neuhoff attack also his thing? Because he was paying rent, after all, in the first game.
True.
The way Logan said that he doesn't want us to make him like in a Christ figure. Too late, man. Too late.
He's basically a martyr. Basically. I mean, if you think about it.
He's a
It's
war
a martyr
criminal,
with
but
war crimes. That's what we deserve. That's what we love.
He is a war criminal, but he does have some actual valid point. Not saying it's right, but like he does bring up points that would be considered in a legal court of law, like in the ICC or something like that. And
yeah,
Merhoyed is really interesting, at least for me, because it's chemical weapons is what my main field of research is. So
yeah.
Yeah, I have to
it's
go
really
back
fun.
and play Kingdom Come
It's really interesting. Yeah.
or 1 and see. I can't remember a lot of the smaller plot points. I'm like, oh god, there's so much that happens all the time.
Yeah, no, he goes on a proper spree, but again, like, you're trying to distract the enemy. You're trying to like fraggle the enemy's forces, aren't you? You're attacking like logistics and this kind of thing from his point of view.
Yeah,
And I think the other thing that's clear is that, and I think this is a beautiful message in the game, is that you're the more the enemy is the other, the more they are othered, right? The easier it is for you to do horrible things to them. And what's interesting in the first one is the Kumans are wearing those very distinct helmets, right? And they really feel like an alien kind of force in the land, a very othered. You don't see their faces, you know, because they've got those helmets. And from Istvan's point of view, obviously, as he learns Henry more, he gets to know Henry better, right? Even though it's through, you know, conflict, he gets to know him better, and it's difficult to do these horrible things to people that you know and have feelings for and have a history with. So
yeah, humanizing.
Yeah, and that's what's sickening him, right? He's just like, oh, God, I actually kind of know Henry now, you know, at this point.
He's grossed out. He's like, oh, what are these feelings?
Yeah, why am I doing this to Henry? We should just be having a drink and like just sorting this out. But like, if only I could make him see sense, you know?
Yeah, Ishtvan has like this ultimate goal of like, you know, pushing back the Turks and like defeating the Turks and stuff. That
yeah, and he wants Henry with him on that, I think, you know, like really, like one way or the other. And then we get into the weirder kind of fan fiction stuff. And maybe it's a good time to go there now because there's
I have a little bit of a question regarding actually Eric and Henry and kind of their perils, but in more of a sense that Ishtvan is taking this role of a mentor for both of them in a way, and I was wondering if Ishtvan himself had a mentor maybe during his Nicopolis time or post Nicopolis where he learned the ropes of someone mentoring and someone teaching you how to survive this world and how to survive it well mentally in the first place, and if there was somehow an idea you had about that maybe
It's a brilliant question. That's a brilliant question. I'm going to use that as the segue then into this second section, because here we just cover this kind of fan fiction stuff and my thoughts on these different things, right? And anybody's thoughts and so on, and the stuff that I've seen over the past month or whatever it is, like different things have been generated. So this is a great question. Like, if you're going to replicate the same story with this man as Henry, he's going to have similar experiences. So it's an arch plot, right? So he needs to find the mentor figure, he needs to chase the shadow and all of that kind of stuff. And you don't want to do like a normal things. You want to have some kind of comment on it. And honestly, I've only really just begun to think about that. Like, I did not think about it. I did think about the shadow kind of being, right, So this is the goth section, everybody. We're moving from the Toth section to the goth section now. So for me, there's this kind of like pro-like survival, right? I just on the kind of soundtrack Istvan kind of rises from the ashes of his destroyed homeland, right? That's the kind of, or house, you know, that's the initial start. He somehow kind of survives. And then maybe in a more brutal reading, he's captured. But I went with a kind of middle reading of this. He somehow survives, and then he goes on a Henry-like quest. And then, yeah, who could that figure be? I've some really interesting stuff has come up. But the shadow, because he was always told that the Turks would come for him, you know, if he was a bad boy, and then the Turks did come, then if you're a young man, then you're going to conclude it's somehow your fault, you know?
Yeah, so, you're going to internalize it.
Yeah, exactly. So what did he do? What did Istvan do wrong? What taboo did he break, perhaps, that caused the Turks to come, this nightmare to destroy his life? And that's when you get into the vampire stuff, right? Because there was a lot of like copying practices from different cultures and all this kind of mythology that built up over the years. But whatever way you see it, this kind of like vampire kind of legend is like the monster under the bed, right? And the monster under the bed for Istvan was the Turks, and maybe some figure like the Martin von Owlitz, you know, like kind of raider, kind of commando, or something like that. If you wanted to go for kind of I think like a basic surface reading, I would go there. But then what's okay? But again, with the goth stuff, I quite like this idea. I don't know whether it was the Viscount who brought this up. I'm honestly not sure because so much has happened. Viscount, were you the one who brought up the Burns?
No.
Who brought up the Burns?
I was the capturing.
I think it was Becca, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's great, right? So that's great because you've got another level of like motivation, another level of complexity in the character. So I thought that was a really good idea. And then you can have this mentor figure as some kind of Transylvanian, Bernatian alchemist, right? Similar to KCD2, perhaps, who kind of helps you recover from the wounds and taught Istvans some of the basic lessons to start him off on his journey. So I think that would be the mentor, some kind of like Transylvanian hermit or something. But I really only just started thinking about that, I have to be honest. I hadn't put anything into that. And then in terms of the Gothic quest, I think that has to be bound up a little bit with some kind of Christianity. I think that his Christianity was probably really strong, right, in his youth, and then he did something wrong from a Christian perspective, and then the Turks came and he somehow connected those things together. And then his Christianity is really in question, I think, during Nicopolis. And personally, but I don't know whether I was getting too romantic with it, but personally I thought he was like, from his perspective, it was like a miracle that saved him at Nicopolis. It was so bad, it was going so wrong that literally something almost miraculous happened, and he felt like he'd been saved by angels or something. And then that information, that kind of revelation he takes into kind of middle Ishtvan. But that was as far as I went with the that kind of Gothic stuff. I mean, I'm reading and everything, but I love all the different vampire and werewolf aspects. I think that's really, really fun. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, it is good. So if anybody wants to ask any questions on that or talk amongst yourselves, then or Nicopolis related, go on.
Wait 1 second. So we're having some technical difficulties. Like Chris is not having audio right now. So there's that. We don't know how to fix it yet. And some people said that their Twitter is kind of crashing right now. But I just wanted to say that. And also, I have a question from someone before we go to the goth section.
Okay, no worries. If it's getting a bit chaotic, we just manage the chaos, okay?
Yeah. They have been waiting for that question to be answered for a while now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no worries.
I will read it. Phrase Scissor Emoji asks, what you think from your point of view, what kind of relationship would Ishtvan and Radzik have before the invasion of Skalitz?
I'm so far down the rabbit hole on that one. I watched the Taking of Talmberg again. I really highly recommend you watch the Taking of Talmberg because Radzik literally rides straight into the castle.
He does.
Yeah. He rides straight in, man. Like I am charging them. Like then he's with Istvan, right? And whatever is going on in there. But for me, that stuff is where what Warhorse have created is very interesting. And what direction that goes in, I don't know. But I think there's loads and loads of subtext that can be explored to create great comedy for a start. But yeah, you've got this kind of like arch plot, haven't you? Where you've got Istvan, you've got Dadzig, the father complex. You've got Martin, you've got a bit of father complex there. You've got this dark teacher figure. You've got Godwin's kind of like positive teacher figure. You know, you've got
Bernard.
it's very Jungian, right? And he goes through all of this kind of thing. But actually, at the end of it, so you've got the arch plot, right? But what they've got at the end of it is they've got this world that exists forever, right? Because you can replay this world and you can meet the characters and you can break the dialogue down in all sorts of other ways and look at levels like you would if you were studying a text, right, in school. So you can do all of that, and I think that's great. And then what they've got then is like they've got this kind of like with the shipping circles that you guys produced, they've got a kind of like Twin Peaks type scenario where they've got like 15 characters actually, and people are interested in each of the different characters for different reasons, and they'll probably get their own like fan fictions that interact in all sorts of different ways. But the Istzig, for me, like obviously I know Michael quite well, so, and I think what's really interesting in those scenes is what's unsaid, you know, because I watched it as well, I played it, right? So I played it from Henry's perspective, and like who is this guy? Who's this guy suddenly like wandering around? And he feels like he knows Radzig quite well, you know, like they kind, you know, he's patting him on the back and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
So
and he
even
told him about Henry.
Well, yeah, I mean, I looked into that a little bit more, and like, he says like they said, which is maybe even worse, right? So it's like he was maybe even hanging out with Radzig and a bunch of his courtiers, right? And they were all chatting about it. Because that's the kind of, maybe having a laugh. I think that's the way we're playing it on KCD Twitter at the moment. But, you know, like, it feels like there was something said between them, right? And I feel like it was either a threat, like Istvan came in to threaten or explain the situation to Radzig. Maybe they go back, maybe they don't. But if they don't go back, then I think he came as some kind of envoy, because Radzig would have known what's going on. And then you can get into all sorts of funny stuff. I think someone brought up the idea that like Ishtvan and Radzig are like in cahoots together, like almost against Sigismund, and they're going to like rob all the silver and then disappear off together into the sunset. I think that's really funny. And then of course the spectre of Istevsig is I don't know. Is it past like children's hours at this point? You know, obviously that can get extremely graphic. But what's interesting is that just when I watched it again today, he just rides straight into the castle. Like he rides straight in, like Radzig's going to Istvan for some reason, and then you can maybe even get into, because you look at Lady Stephanie, right? Like she's stupid and she's just being conned by Ishtvan. But actually, it's kind of it's the guards who begin the process of letting them in. And then Stephanie kind of sees Ishtvan, and the guard goes, maybe we should reconsider. And she goes, no, let them in, right? I think that's a very interesting subtext that could be explored in all sorts of different ways. It's a great comic effect. But it's not necessarily canon, right? This is just for funsies. Sorry, you speak. Yeah.
I was just wanted to mention that I see people like saying a lot that Divish has very weird friends, like Radzig himself. So it's not surprising that like another weirdo comes into Stephanie's house asking for help, and she's like, "Oh, it's one of his buddies again. Okay, well, come in." Like, you know, problematic friends.
Yeah, and I mean, this is all that's valid. And it depends what you. It always depends what you take as like canon, don't you? Because okay, this seems like a bunch of people that are pretty up with like critical theory and stuff. But sometimes writers don't even know what they're writing into the story, right? Because the themes that they're exploring have cultural significance, that they're not fully aware of what the impacts of that means, or that their own subconscious is working something out through the text. You know, you don't really know, and that's why you get all of these critics and all of this literary theory that exists to like study these things. But I feel like you'll always get more fun out of it if you start looking at symbolism and if you start looking at subtext. You know, that's how I would teach, and that's how I learned. Because obviously we do a lot of this in theatre class, right? We're reading texts all the time and analysing them from all sorts of different theories and blah blah blah. Yeah, because if you read the Wikipedia on Istvan, it's like, oh, Istvan went into the town and like almost managed to escape in time before the raid came, and it's like, what? You know, like obviously something was going on there. Whatever it is, I don't know. But like, if people want to unpack it in different ways for fun and for exploration, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's fun to look at the characters and the scenarios from all angles possible, no matter how conflicting they are with each other.
Exactly, and you're enriching the world by doing that. You know, like, and if things are, there is no such thing as canon in kind of literary studies. It's very basic to kind of like read the text on the surface level and say that's the meaning, right? Like that's like what you do when you're like 12 or something. The moment you start getting critical about stuff, you're looking at structuralism and, you know, homoerotic criticism or queer theory or eco theory or all sorts of different things. And you can apply them to Kingdom Come. And I think that's why it's so good. One of the reasons is that it's actually it's very rich intellectually, the piece, and it's very rich politically. So that's why it's partially like such a cultural phenomenon, I think.
Yeah, great game for politics perverts like me. I love politics. So,
by the way, how canon the comic is, because it's funny to me that in the comic it's actually Ishtvan's idea to attack Skalitz because he knows Radzig.
Oh, yeah. I mean, sure. Again, why did Radzig ride straight into the castle? What's Istvan really saying there?
He just missed you.
Is he telling them something else, and has he got something else going on? You know, like subtext is, you get crazy on subtext in English literature, and I'm not told to read the comics. You're not told to do that kind of thing. I think that came as a spin-off after the game, maybe. And we're not told to, like, we're not kind of given lore and these kind of things. So if anything that I say is somewhat out of canon, like you can imagine it one way as like Istvan spinning history, but you can also imagine it as like, I think really what you're getting is just the surface, and if you want to go into the depths and like imagine different scenarios and different histories and so on, I think that's really good for learning and for imagination and all this kind of thing. So I approve.
Thank you so much. There's a question here that someone has that I think would go into the Meowspan category, but it's a very funny question, and I think people are getting tired, especially the person who wants to ask this. So I think
sure, yeah, no
maybe
problem.
it's the time to ask that.
Yeah,
real quick.
I'll go on as long as I can, but yeah, Meowspan, fine.
like not to skip any categories, but just like a quick little question from someone.
Yeah, if they have to
Someone
go,
has a
they have to
very
go.
funny
I'm happy
question.
to
I would
jump the
appreciate
Meowspan, no problem.
I would appreciate if just someone would just ask this question now because it's silly.
I think that's supposed to be me. Hi, good evening. Yeah, I'm getting really
good
tired,
evening.
and I am very interested in knowing if there is something going on actually with Istzig. What I wanted to ask is, so what is your nightmare blunt rotation with the KCD characters?
The nightmare blunt rotation?
Yes.
I mean, the worst blunt rotation?
Yes, like, who wouldn't you want to do a blunt rotation with?
Mark Vav on Owlets, probably. Definitely would not want to smoke weed with him. Who else would I probably wouldn't smoke weed with Eric, to be honest. I don't think he probably handles that very well.
You just want to be a good influence.
Well, I don't know. I have a feeling that he did. It's not an amazing drug for Eric. Because it affects people in different ways, doesn't it? Like Mark, if you're going to talk about what kind of drugs they do, I don't think Mark Bart is a pothead. It doesn't strike me as he would like that. He's probably like a whiskey kind of drinker. But Yeah, like not many of them. I don't think not many of them. Like probably in my top blunt rotation, probably be Martin and Ratic.
Absolutely fair enough.
I think us three maybe, and Stephanie.
Oh. No, I mean fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No. That's great. Good to know.
The question was who I don't want to smoke pot with, right?
I mean, yeah, but at the same time, who do you want to smoke weed with?
Yeah, I think that would be the dream. That would be the dream rotation. But I don't know the other games so well, and so I can't really speak perfectly on that right now.
That is understandable. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.
No problem. Good night.
Bye.
And now, like, news on the technical difficulties. Chris is reloading Google, I think. It might end the space, but we're not sure yet. But it might also fix
Actually,
it. So
I'm back. I'm on
Oh
my
my God.
second account.
I was like, who-
and it
thank God.
works. I'm on my phone
Hi.
and it works. I'm sorry.
She's so back.
I'm back. I'm back,
Perfect.
guys.
I have a question in regards to the goth theme. Is late Istvan religious? Like, or does he question religion, or is he agnostic or completely atheistic? Because we've touched on that young Istvan is really strong into religion. I'm really curious about like the Istvan before his death being religious or not.
Okay, so this is I think this is like Goth and Thoth, right? So the early stuff I think is Christian, and I think it really gives a really good load to have Ishtvan as quite serious Christian in the beginning. And also possibly after Nicopolis, I think it's almost like I think he really feels like he's been saved, right? And then maybe what have I been saved for is always the question that you ask. I think you've been saved, right? And he believes so much in the crusade, right? He's really into it because it's defeating his shadow and it goes wrong. So I think even though he feels saved, he's kind of like constantly asking God, what you want me to do then? And I think, again, this is my personal thought, so it just adds different levels possibly to the way I played the character, but it's not necessarily canon, right? And you can imagine this playing out in a bunch of different ways, but I think that he was tasked after Nicopolis with infiltrating the Ottoman Empire a little bit in various ways on the way back. And I think that's where he picked up his rogue skills, like maxed his rogue skills out. So, and that's also because Lawrence of Arabia came up in reference to that. So I think that's the kind of Lawrence of Arabia phase a little bit. And well, I think that's mixed actually. That's a Goth and Thoth kind of thing. There's aspects of that in Lawrence of Arabia, but during that journey, as I said, when he was mingling with these kind of cosmopolitan courts, if you've come from somewhere like Skalitz and then you're exposed to this fervent of different ideas and different inventions and whatever science was back then, because it was around these kind of courts, and the darker science of like military stuff that was going on, different military developments and secretive programs. Back then they had these secret programs. I think like Venetian glass was kept secret for like hundreds of years or something. So I think he was kind of infiltrating all of this stuff. And then I think he came into that kind of like mystery cult kind of Byzantine kind of thing, maybe. Maybe something of the Egyptian that was hidden and left over, and the Islamic kind of side of things. So I think he got a taste of all of that. And because he got a taste of all of that, it made him question Christianity, or Christianity in the kind of like absolute kind of simplistic kind of way that he'd started out with. And I think because of the fact that it's the same God, right? Like Allah and God in that ways, and so it's kind of like two gods' armies kind of fighting each other to the death. That kind of like Bhagavad Gita realization wouldn't have been like lost on him, I think. And then I think, even though he's like intellectually curious during that kind of Middle Istvan period, and he's picking up on different things and being exposed to different cultures, I think in the later Istvan he's quite cynical. And so the way I kind of took, because there's a darker kind of goth route, and I don't really want to go there personally. If anybody else wants to be my guest, I'm happy to look at it. You know, the kind of like rejecting, denouncing God and this kind of like very vampire-y type thing. Yeah, I would love to see it, but that wasn't the way I went with it. Was more into something like deism. So he's like Istvan's a bit of a proto-enlightenment thinker in the way he's like being suspicious of nobility and like general idiocy and that kind of thing. And the deist philosophy is this kind of enlightenment period where I think they believed in a god, but that it wasn't personally involved. So in Catholicism, I think you have to go through a series of steps for your message to reach God, right? You have to go through the priest goes to the angel, goes to the archangel, and it goes up and down, kind of like a messenger system. Whereas Protestantism was like direct revelation with like a personal God. I think he had that moment, and then it didn't happen again. He got lost in this kind of mix of different ideas and different experiences. And then I think he came out, and especially with the Islam versus Christianity paradox, I think he came up with his final position was that God exists but doesn't care. Is not personally involved with creation, like it happens. And this is also like where science kind of started to find its way, right? That was the kind of philosophical bridgehead that science needed to flourish, as I understand it. So I think he was like a bit proto that. Because the atheist reading of that didn't quite resonate with me. Like oh, God doesn't give a shit about us was much more like deism than atheism. And you can read this kind of that hell is only a threat to keep people in line. There's also a bit of a deist take. So I didn't have, on the kind of religious level of the breakdown of the character, I didn't have him as an atheist. I had him as lots of different religious experiences over time that led to this kind of religious paradox, if you like, where he just kind of gave up. And that's the end of my answer.
Thank you. It was really interesting to listen to.
No problem.
I was wondering, like, where does his sexuality stand on this? Like, in his weird relationship with God and with himself, like, does it have an influence or something?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask too, like the similar question. If we take in account that if we see Ishtvan as a queer man, like people say that he rejects God, but what if he feels like he's also being rejected by God because, well, religion is obvious.
Yeah, I know, and I didn't want to go into that fully transgressive mode, right?
Well, yeah.
Which wait, just I have my justification for it, but like obviously it's there, and obviously Ishtvan would have been feeling those things, and I definitely folded it into ambiguous Istvan, you know, like so I thought about it. I'm not rejecting your question. I think but to me it kind of pushes you in the direction of like Luciferianism or like Satanism or something like that, where, you know, he believes in God, but he hates God and he's turned against it. And he's like, and I felt that wasn't quite cynical enough for him. I felt like deism was actually more cynical than atheism, you know, and I felt he would have moved beyond like wrapping his personal, like his personal issues with the Godhead, if you know what I mean. I think he realized who he was. He had his own conflicts internally, and in the end, for one reason, maybe he couldn't bring that to terms with the Godhead, which is so he became a deist. But that was my take on it, because to go with the ultra goth kind of, like, again, it's too vampire-y. I think that's really in there. I think it's like in the character, but personally, because of the text as well, I didn't want to quite go that way with my final kind of like choices. And again, it's on that line, right? I mean, it's really on that line. There's maybe a few other lines, but it's really about that line, I think.
Well, yeah, it's like partially just one of those many things that made him question all of that system. Not fully the reason,
Yeah,
but like partially, yeah.
Yeah, I think you can come up with loads of different hypothetical, different scenarios with that. And again, it's like if he's homosexual and that's considered a pardon punishable by eternal damnation, then he's damned, isn't he? Right? So do you live your life as somebody who thinks they are damned, or do you philosophically escape from that, psychological prison somehow? And if you are going to do that, then, and you're going to execute some kind of religious escape, then it's going to be through renouncing or rejecting God altogether and going the other way, right? Or to somehow solve the problem within the religious system, or to separate yourself from God entirely. And separating yourself from God entirely is either this kind of like atheism, right? Or I think deism kind of like does something similar. But it allows you to kind of like keep a sense that this is a creation, which I think he had in mind, rather than this reality we live in is something that evolved from the Big Bang or whatever. If that makes sense.
I really like the idea of him being more mindful about it rather than just throwing everything, because, well, he lives in this environment. Why would he just reject all of it?
Oh yeah, exactly, and that's what I was saying at the beginning. Is like it's almost a completely different type of consciousness. You can't imagine it, like how ingrained it was in people and the way they thought and the way they acted. It's so alien, and how isolated they all were, and how spirits were incredibly real. Like there wasn't much going on other than the natural world, so people were watching it all the time. And all sorts of phenomena that we just miss because we're, not living in the countryside. They were seeing it, Dance of the Fireflies, Will-o'-the-Wisps, all this kind of like natural phenomena that looks magical. They were witnessing it way more than we do. And so that world was really alive, and civilization, as we know it, was so far away. You were so far removed from that. You didn't have that kind of like open-mindedness that we necessarily take for granted in a cosmopolitan society. It just wasn't an option. You never asked those questions because you never knew you could ask those questions. And then how do you play that? How do you play that? How do you completely divorce yourself from your modern, take on something? I don't know. We try.
So is that like, does anybody want to ask questions on that topic that we're speaking, like about the religion? Or I have a question about Vampire the Masquerade. So it's like a goth, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so you spoke about how you like the lore, and I have a lore question. So I don't know if you remember, but the vampire world like has this 3 big factions: Camarilla, Sabbath, my favorite, and Anarchs, right? So what do you think if Ishtvan and Eric were
okay, so they would be okay. I can answer this question. Yeah. I think so. if I was going to see, if I wanted to see the full goth version of the hysteric thing, then I would have them basically having become vampires ages ago, right? And they're just showing up in this world, in this form, in this time, and their histories are obscured because histories were obscured back then, and they both survive. Whatever Kingdom Come happens at Kingdom Come, and they end up later on appearing. I'd make them like, I think it's Sebaceans. I think it's the really old, like the it's like Cain, right? It's related to like Cain, like the grandson of Cain or something. Yeah, that faction. And they have some insane powers as well. I don't want to like go into Vampire the Masquerade too much, but I remember they have. Is it Baal? Is it Baal?
I think yes.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah. So
remember.
Baal was within the Sebacean. Yeah. Or no, maybe
and they're
no,
also Eastern European.
Yeah, but they had this one power where they could turn their like skin into like marble, so they can't be staked. And that gothic stuff we've seen of Istvan, which is like statuesque. I quite like that. But if that answers your question, the really dark, the really evil ones.
I love it.
Close to,
Thank you so
close
much.
to Cain. Yeah.
For making them Sebaceans, I'm thrilled. Okay.
Okay, who's next?
Okay, there's a question from the comments of the space. I'm just gonna read it. How much do you? It's not really goth. I skipped this accidentally earlier, so I'm just gonna do it now. How much do you wager Ishtvan actually likes Henry? If he really does see himself in Henry, what do you imagine he would make of Henry or Hans, and Hans?
Istvan's not going to have a problem with that, right? I don't think it's. There's one that homophobic, homosexual description of Istvan, which I think is really good, like camp and really funny, and like exactly. There's lots of room for humor there, but I think if we're talking the reality that they somehow teamed up, I don't think he would have any problem with that, would he? Personally. Well, but again, like I know the kind of like the chuds kind of do a very, very like very kind of groomy reading of Istvan and all that. But if you're going to go that way, I think you go right into the kind of like Jason Bourne type War Machine and the Frankenfurter stuff, and Istvan's really trying to like use whatever techniques he's learned to turn Eric into the ultimate like war machine, but also kind of like sexy kind of Rocky figure. And that he just wants, and he's become so obsessed with this like program of his that he just wants to churn out more and more of these guys. And I think he just put Henry into the same program, right? To create more Rockies.
Thank you very much. That's a great answer.
No problem. You needed to know Rocky Horror, by the way, guys, to fully appreciate that.
I think we should do a watch night sometime around Halloween, just evil gang watching Rocky Horror, because it's amazing.
There is most of those people in here are gay. I think they are very
absolutely
versed in the
I'm pretty much speaking to the people who have watched Rocky Horror, I'm sure. But if you haven't, go watch it, and then you'll understand what I mean.
Right now.
Okay, guys, I've got about half an hour left, I think. So we might have to kind of like make some cuts. But if there's no, don't panic. If there's a surplus of questions, we can do another one of these, and not a problem. But just for my own like endurance sake. So we're kind of doing like Thoth and Goth stuff, and they're the kind of things that I thought were interesting questions. And somebody brought up the Frankenstein's monster kind of idea between Eric and Ishtvan, and I do quite like that. And I think that there's an extreme form of that where it's like the Jason Bourne kind of program, the film like where they're trying to create super soldiers, I think that was probably one of the takeaways from Nicopolis, you know, that the Turks have much better soldiers, and they kind of learned probably very brutal techniques that they were using to create these soldiers. And then I think they started like trying to replicate that, because again, like when people are talking about this, like the Turks were like incredibly superior in terms of what they were chucking. And I know people were joking about the Turkish plane coming to kill Istvan's parents, which I thought was hilarious. But I was trying to make a genuine point about the military kind of disadvantage at that point from Europeans. Like they had all sorts of stuff, the Turks, and I think in the aftermath of the defeat, like Sigismund and István would both been interested in finding out how they did what they did, you know. And if you read into I think the aftermath of Nicopolis, they took everyone under the age of 20 prisoner. So they were already like turning these guys into janissaries, as I understand it, or maybe experimenting. And I think that's quite an interesting line of inquiry if you want to look at it from a modern point of view as well, like how you create a modern Marine, right, in the US Army. There's like dehumanizing things that have to happen as part of the training in order for people to do the things that they have to do, right? So there's some interesting ethical questions in that I'd be curious if people explored. But that's really what I wanted to say on the Thoth stuff. But I think there's also various alchemical things that he could have learned there. And exposure to these different types of schools and philosophies that I think are very interesting. And yeah, and then the psychology, because Chris suggested putting the psychology questions under Thoth. And I think that there is a very useful kind of, or very interesting Jungian reading of Kingdom Come. I think it's very symbolic, and it has really like drawn from like medieval kind of, you know, iconography. But I think because it's taken from that and it's written so sensitively, there's a very good kind of like very strong kind of Jungian reading. So people who wanted to do like psychoanalysis of the characters and stuff, I think that's also a very interesting line of inquiry. And I just wanted to say that in the Thoth section. But if anybody has any questions on that now, we should do them like quickly, maybe 10 minutes, and then finish with Meowstvan, because I don't want to miss Meowstvan.
I wanna.
Yeah, I also have a little question, but
Go
you
on,
guys
go
go
on.
ahead.
I think Aura had a question. She has been raising her hand for a while now. I think she could.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you kindly. Do you hear me?
Yep, we hear you.
Yes.
Yeah, we hear you.
Yep.
All right, because this is the first. I am not quite sure where we at right now because I lost track of the agenda. But I don't know. Should I just freely talk?
Yeah. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
I'm a bit excited. Sorry. Actually, what I wanted to ask is just like your thoughts on historic take I found on Tumblr, because I found it funny, and I think it also fits quite nicely to things you said before, because you mentioned that we look at things from a modern lens, and I think as far as Ishtvan's and Eric's relationship is concerned, we actually don't really know that much because, well, the game obviously just shows us very, very small parts. And so all we know is that Ishtvan killed his parents, and took him and they are lovers. And many people are saying like it's grooming, it's toxic. And yeah, from a modern perspective, it is. And I don't want to say anything against that, so please don't misunderstand. But I think it just raises a very clear and dark picture of the relationship. And we can't really dig into it or can't really know.
No, okay, I know where you're going with this. So if I can respond just for time, like one thing is there's a kind of romanticized idea of the village again in Kingdom Come to begin with. So you kind of imagine that Eric is a Henry in another Skalitz, and Istvan has burned this Skalitz down, just like what happens to Henry, and then somehow like kind of like captured Eric from the ruins and then molested him or whatever. And I think that's a really crude, like pretty simplistic reading of it.
Oh,
personally, but again, if you want to do that and there's some mileage there, then why not? But again, if you listen to the conversations between them in Kingdom Come 2, I think it's pretty difficult to do that. My parents were weak, Istvan was strong, is what Eric says. And then you kind of go into like, what kind of life did Eric have in this place? Who were his parents?
It's very, very interesting.
Again, there's something similar where you've got Twin Peaks, which is this kind of like highly romanticized kind of American picturesque town. But then you've got another town next to it. I can't remember the name of it, but it's in the kind of like lore and in the kind of like offshoot movies and things. But it's kind of like the anti-Twin Peaks, it's an absolute dive, and were Eric's parents abusive to him? Were they neglectful of him? Were they weak somehow? Could they not control him? Was he a nutcase, and they couldn't get a grip on him? So, he was already a bit of a maniac and not at home there, and was pulled off into the kind of like circus of chaos and raids by this very romantic figure of Toth and so on. That's more understandable. Yeah, and power differentials and stuff. Yeah, again, like if you want to go there, and there's usefulness in the story, and it helps you explore something more in the modern world and so on. Fair enough, but like the Turks were like literally kidnapping and brainwashing them, and torturing them, and you're doing all sorts. Like there's so much horrific stuff was happening during that time, and all the way up to like Victorian times. To young people, it's and also like the idea of a child, I think, is a Victorian invention. I think that at 5 maybe kids were sent down the mines or something, so they were seen as young or small humans, I think, more than like this idea of child as sacrosanct and there's some kind of monster disturbing this like perfect upbringing in this picturesque village. I think it's quite naive, but yeah, again, like take it whatever direction you want. I think.
Oh, can I just?
Yeah, go on.
because I think I may have started it the wrong way. I think I just wanted to sort of elaborate that this is like the picture which is painted about them, and I think it happens because we don't know so much about what is actually going on. I think you can grasp nuances from their dialogues. And also from their directions, but I actually found like something of a reverse take on their relationship, and it's more of a jokey thing, more of a fun thing. But I just wanted to know what you think about it, and I would just like to read out the post. It's very short.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
All right, just give me a second. Okay, so Red Nightmare 18 on Tumblr Road. Okay, fine, whatever. Hysteric is toxic yaoi or whatever because of the massive power difference between them, etc., yada yada. You are correct. Eric will always be far more powerful than Ishtvan because Ishtvan is the walking embodiment of an insane and passionate star-crossed text scroll at 3 a.m. about how it is only us, my darling, and our sick and twisted love against the heinous and hideous world. I love you, I hate you, I revile you, I am you, and you will never be me, no matter how much you try. You are my everything, my blood and my marrow, my bloodthirsty hound and my young unblooded saint, and together we are nothing at all. And meanwhile, Eric is the walking embodiment of the thumbs up emoji. So it was a bit more of a joke, but I was like, okay, is it actually what is the actual power dynamic between them? Was the question I was asking myself because we can't really grasp it. And actually, this is like a funny way to just flip the whole thing. And I think for the most parts, which we get about the relationship, I mean, Eric is like he goes mad after he hears that Ishtvan died, but I think Ishtvan really shows like this strong vulnerability, which you just mentioned before, whenever like something happens to Eric or is about to happen to him. So I thought this was
But
very
he
interesting
would
because
act
it's
the same if it was
different.
his child, right? I mean, like, you
Yeah.
know, like, and that's where it's kind of, that's where it's super ambiguous. I mean, obviously, we played them as having some, you know, romantic connection as well as, because that's what it was, you know. But there's more folded into that than just that. And I think if you want to separate that stuff out in isolation from things like class and from things like orphans and things like shared history in all sorts of ways and whatever journeys they've been on together, whatever adventures they were in, you know, like Hans and Henry or whatever, quote unquote, you know, we don't know. So, and also it was humanizing the enemy, wasn't it? That's the kind of emotional payoff in that scene. And I think it was done extremely beautifully, you know, like, I'm happy with the acting. Like, I am happy. I've obviously looked at it in lots of different ways, but like the whole kind of like the build up to that whole scene in the tower is just, it's so well done by Warhorse. So, you know, like, you know, hats off to them because we're only a small part of that, right? Yeah, I kind of like, again, if it's useful for you or fandom to discuss this kind of thing and you get something out of it, then go ahead and like do as much as you want. I think trying to put power structures back then in the context of like modern power structures kind of doomed to failure, especially if you're going to pick on that one first. Like, if people want to get into like theory and stuff, then like, Jesus, there's peasants everywhere, you know, like these people are being brutally oppressed by like robber barons. You know, like, I'd start there if you want to talk about power structures. Because, yeah, when they like marrying princesses at the age of 8 and stuff, like, I mean, you know, and yet they judge me. It's a bit like that to me. But and again, like if you go back in that time period, then certain things that we find highly questionable wouldn't have been questionable. And things that we find not questionable at all would have been highly questionable. So I don't know how much traction there is with that. I think if anything, it throws whatever we believe today into sharp relief. It doesn't really cast any light on that personally. But you do you, right?
Oh, I was just curious. Thank you so much for replying.
No problem. You general pronoun, I mean, not specifically.
Can I say something about this, like, very quickly? Because I think the whole thing is, the topic is too complex to talk about, I think, because back then, like, there were terrible stuff happening all the time. And, like, of course, like, we can kind of talk about, you know, the historic relationship and the problematic aspects of it. But at the same time, like, I mean, there were so many things that were happening there, you know, with even stuffs like Henry's and age in the first game, which whatever, that's another fact. It is another thing, but like, I think it's just too complex, and there is like, I don't think that just limiting them to being like, oh yeah, this was like grooming or something. I think it's a bit too much. I think, yeah. I
think it's useful for the people who would rather dehumanize Istvan because that's what they want, you know. But if you're questioning it and you're finding more about the character and therefore you're finding more about yourself and the world, I think this is like a very, very good thing to do. I mean, that's where any literary figure, right? It's not like just this one. You happen to be in this game at the moment, you'll be in another game, but these games are kind of contemporary literature. So, you know, if asking those questions is useful, then you should do it. But like otherwise, I think it can be kind of counterproductive. Okay, it can be a bit counterproductive.
Yeah. I completely agree. I was
just
saying,
they're promoting, you know, like because Hans was supposed to be 14 and You know, like according to history, then Daniel is now promoting, you know, paedophilia or something. It's madness. I think the game's just so much more intellectually complicated and rich and well designed than that to reduce it to these. I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm just reacting to what I know other people are doing, and I think it's a bit simplistic.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
mean.
no, I think we're
Yeah.
agreeing. We're agreeing. I just want to
Yeah,
make my position clear so people don't misunderstand me. But yeah, no, we're agreeing. We're agreeing.
Can I since I'm speaking just very quickly, can I also ask a question? I'm not sure if I'm in the right segment, but I was just wondering if there was a DLC that would be focusing on Istvan, what would you want it to be about? Is it I don't know, Istvan's past, or maybe something like they did in the first game with the Women's
Nah,
Night, where
dude,
it was.
if you're gonna do it, I do it like KCD1, but it just ends in Nicopolis. And
Oh
that's
yeah, okay, yeah.
and that's the realization for people who played KCD1 and 2, that Nicopolis was just so more insane. It was just so because it's a bit like the Elder Scrolls, you know what I mean? Like Oblivion kind of feels a bit like middle Germany, right? It's kind of it feels quite familiar, right? Especially to people from this area of the world, right? It feels extremely familiar. But then when you were playing Morrowind, right, which was the game before, Morrowind was really alien. It felt like you were really going to a completely different place, and you had to learn all the cultures anew. There was really very little that was familiar, and you kind of arrive as a refugee or a prisoner, and you have to learn all of these things and kind of piece together your destiny and everything. So I'd like to see an Istvan Untold like that, where you're going into really truly kind of from the point of view of KCD1, right, to contrast the contrast. You really like how you would like how the people of Skalitz or the people of this region othered the Cumans, right? Then the Cumans were othering the Turks, right? So, but it's the next level of weirdness in terms of the perspective, and I'd really like to see that kind of clash of Islam and Christianity done sensitively, as sensitively as they did this. I think they could do that really well. But I think that's the one I would pick. The one I'm really interested in terms of just as a creative is the bit afterwards. But I don't think that would be such a good game. I think that would be a great TV show.
Yeah, I think so too. That actually would be great. But
yeah, it would be a great TV show. It'd be a bit I don't know, but you'd have one episode every week where Istvan does a different set of roguing skills in a different country in the Levant.
Yeah, I think Ishtvan in general as a character is so interesting. He could have amazing series, comics and stuff, everything just dedicated to him. I think it would also make a lot of money. So I don't know, Warhol, just get on it.
No, as I said, Istvans had a really good arc, and one of the things that's great about writing characters is that the worlds that you guys create right in your heads afterwards. This is an amazing part of any text, and this is what makes it a kind of literary phenomenon, because people have been doing this with Hansry, right? Getting really into it and taking it different directions, and that's fantastic. So what I'm trying to say is that often creativity comes from what's unsaid as opposed to what's said, right? So they've created all of this possibility for these characters, and I don't think they need to say anything about it, oh yeah, okay, if there's a massive kind of fan demand or something, maybe they'll come up on this and they'll think about doing something with it. But but I don't know if that's necessary. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's great that it lives in the imagination, personally. Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to shoot down the balloon there. Obviously, it would be great to do Nicopolis, but you know what I mean. I think there's a lot of magic in not saying things.
Yeah, I totally understand.
Okay, so I've been wanting to ask a question about Hysteric,
And the question is whether Istvan like wanted to get this close to Eric and whether he had some doubts about that, because I mean his past is just filled with pain and he lost his home, and then suddenly he just takes in this random orphan who is not special in any way, but he still takes him in and he still like connects with him on such a level. And I mean he's a lowborn, he's not even a noble, and yet he just takes him in. So did he maybe have some doubts about that, or like how did he, how did he get to
Honestly,
that
I think
point?
there's so many different useful ways you can answer that question, and my thoughts go in different directions. So, kind of goth one. I think the goth one is that that he doesn't want it, but they cannot resist, right? That actually it's supposed to be mission first, but then as the intensity is of the battles and so on drive them closer and closer. And yeah, obviously there's a kind of mentor kind of like dynamic mixed in there, which makes it more complicated. And I mean, and then you go, okay, well, no, he's trying to resist it. He's trying to stay under control the whole time, and you can increase the temptation, right, by keeping them separate, even though they've got this kind of desire for each other and they're staying on the mission, and that builds. And in that, and then you've got a kind of like dark replica of Hanzari, I think. So yeah, I don't really want to give a specific answer on that. Like I spread myself out across all the different possibilities there, but you do know by the end, when they are doing the final farewell scene, that he does have that. Actually, I can maybe say that in Czech. Is it Zbohem Drahi?
Yeah.
Zbohem Drahi Chlapicek?
Chlapečku, maybe? I don't know.
Chlapečku.
Yeah, that means like, yeah.
Zbohem Drahi Chlapečku. Something like that. And it's quite interesting. Zbohem is a translation of farewell in Czech, which also means like adieu. It's like quite heavy.
It's like be with God.
Yeah.
Or
It's
God
like
be with
I'm
you,
not going to see you
basically,
again. Yeah, it's loaded, and in that case, maybe Eric didn't really pick up on how loaded that was, and he's just kind of like, oh, okay, old man, like you'll be all right, I'll be all right, But it is a very loaded thing. He is very worried. I think Istvan at that point, for whatever reason, he's an extreme disquiet.
Absolutely. I think it's because of Henry, because he knows what Henry is capable of, to be honest. And that was actually
that he's damned, I think, and that it's just caught up with him. Like he's just caught up with him. Like something's going to get him. He's become too fucked up, basically. And I think and also he's kind of like personal weaknesses with the wine. I think that's why they put it in there. He's kind of like quaffing too much of the wine.
Yeah.
And that's beginning to weaken him. I can try, because I'm going to have to leave soon. But I wrote down the Hungarian one as well. Let me try it.
Oh my gosh, let's go.
Is it Nuyo Gosh Tuk Chaka? What does it mean? It doesn't mean don't bark at me, you dog.
Yeah.
Is that it? How do you say it again? Tell me.
Ne ugass nekem, te kutya.
Yeah, ne ugass tak kutya. But it was great listening to that. Thank you for sending me that. That was a lot of fun. I haven't had time today to master them, but I'll have another crack at doing it in Hungarian.
Okay, real quick, because I wanted to say you should speak. I wanted to make sure that you get to speak. I'm sorry.
Yeah, of course. I had a question. Like, you made the Istvan the playlist. So
yeah.
I had a question. Like, what would Istvan's favorite goth books or movies be?
Well, my favorite goth is Bram Stoker's Dracula. I would say, which is maybe a bit mainstream, but I really liked it. And obviously when the Francis Ford Coppola version came out, I was quite young, so it was quite it was really good. And I think I read a bit of the book. But I'm not like super au fait with like what's cutting edge in the kind of goth world. So I'm a bit mainstream, and I don't know if I can give you a very good answer. You know, I do like the original Crow. I like Bram Stoker's Dracula. What else do I like that's very gothic? I'm kind of more of a Lovecraft fan, really. Kind of more like Lovecraftian horror, rather than kind of like high gothic kind of horror. But I do like it. You know what I mean? When I come across it, I'm always like, oh, you know, I enjoy it. But it's not. I don't know if I can give you a really good answer for that. I'm really interested in what people are going to do with that personally, because I will learn. I will learn more along the way. And there's that the other thing about like Gothic Christianity as well is something I'm quite interested in. The way the Christian iconography is like all over the Goths, but they're kind of like it's in conflict, isn't it? It's in some kind of like dialogue. So yeah, you guys have to teach me that, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
And maybe if it was a starting question, I could give you a better answer. I'll go away and think about that one and maybe give you a better answer. Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Our favorite Radzig Menace, Kay, has a question for you that is like very important to a bunch of people. The question is Hysteric or Istvan and Radzig.
Oh man, yeah, I know. It's just different. It's different worlds, isn't it? You want the arch plot, then it's hysteric. But if we're getting into kind of like mini plots, you know, between the different characters, I think Istig is fascinating, actually. And I spend too much time thinking about it.
Tell us, please. We want to know
Because I
your
just think it's
thoughts.
really what were they doing? What were they really up to?
Exactly.
They just seem to be in cahoots somehow, especially when I watched him ride straight into that castle. That's extremely suspicious. He just does something super maniacal by riding in there. He's either an idiot, right? The conclusion that you make from that is either a complete idiot, Radzik, which is like one argument, or he's somehow got something going on. He's got some psychic.
You sound like
I also want
And
to
again, he's a robber baron, right? He's a robber baron. Like that, that's his background before he becomes like he's only there for 6 months.
Yeah, you
know, like what's really going on? I think I like the heist. As I said, I like the Istvan Radzig heist kind of thing, heist story. And then yeah, I'm kind of like I'm more into Istig at the moment.
Interesting.
I think
The Ziegler one.
I also wanted to point out
it's subtext, isn't it? It's all because it's again what they didn't say, right? So like I think that's quite rich, that one, and I'm sure there's lots between the other characters, and there's definitely stuff between the characters that I haven't really encountered yet, right? Or properly. So, but that one's I'm probably more into that at the moment than I am into hysteric. I'm like. Although the hysteric stuff's getting very beautiful, you know, like a lot of it's been very beautiful, and I love all the themes. And the Istig's all very like, you know, it's very bawdy and it's very lewd, but it's making me laugh. So, you know,
I wanted to point out how
the best one of Istig. Sorry, guys, the best one of Istig so far was me and him like basically lying, facing each other, naked in bed together, like post shag, and he's like smoking a cigarette, and he says, "So I have a son." That was so funny. Yeah, it's like that's when he first brought it up.
They're just gossiping, you know.
Yeah,
relaxing.
Yeah, exactly.
Radzig is always super chill. That's what I've noticed.
Yeah, exactly. It's so chill, isn't it?
When Ishtvan shows him like on the battle,
I know
on the wall, he's so chill.
We're having a great time.
Like, yeah, we're all right here. Like, why are you so cheerful?
Yeah, I know. It's like it's very suspicious, especially because like he's such a chancer. Like Radzig's clearly such a chancer, and Istvans like opportunistic, right? And also very good at manipulating people. So I'm sure there's something going on, even if he just like offered it to him, right? You know, even if he like just suggested that they go into cahoots together. Anyway, this is non-canon. It's just for fun, and but I think again, like comedy is great. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will have to go in about 10 minutes, so maybe we just do a bit of Meowstvan and then say goodbye.
Yes, please.
Yeah, because
I've been waiting.
this is a bit of a long one. Yeah, I'm not used to speaking this long normally, but yeah. So Meowstvan, just if I can open that up, it's just I really like it because it just seems to work so well with Istvan, and the kind of like dog coding, cat coding thing that people brought up was in my head, especially when I did the jail scene. So David Lynch has this scene in Twin Peaks where they're in jail together, and there's two prisoners, effectively, two teams of prisoners that are facing off against each other through bars. And he comes back to this later on in his career, but it's very, very weird. But in this kind of like opening form of that, the two guys are very dog coded, and they're like and they're barking. And I put the video up the other day. I don't know how many of you saw it, but like, and they're barking, and the other guy's very cat coded, just kind of like quietly kind of staring at them like I'm going to murder you, right? And that was definitely in the energy in that jail scene, and I was surprised by how easy it is to read that, especially when I'm kind of like walking around as well. When I kind of come in, like it's very kind of cat-like, and so yeah. So when people started creating like different Meowstvans and Kitstvans and this kind of thing, I think that's quite fun as well. And it'd be quite interesting to see it done with all of the different characters. Maybe I don't know, or more. Maybe they are being done. I'm just not seeing it, but
Yeah, I think a few people have been doing stuff like that.
okay, maybe I'm just not coming across it. Okay, I need to learn the right hashtags. But it'd be fun to see, because I think the majority of the male characters are kind of dog coded. I don't know where the argument is on that, but well, you tell me. I don't know. Is that a true observation, or is that me just being delusional?
I think you're right, honestly.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, Istvan is clearly a cat, but the rest are mostly dogs. I mean, Eric is like the the definition of an obedient dog, basically.
I don't know. I like to imagine Hans is like he's like a noble stag.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. Or a bird. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, but also maybe one of those not greyhound, but one of those like a certain kind of hunting dog. You know, it's quite beautiful. You know, it kind of has certain poses. I think he could be a bit.
Well, in the first game, Hans has like two hunting dogs, and I think it's like a different breed than like what Mutt is. So
yeah, maybe something like a royal dog, but a deer, sure.
I've seen Dry Devil as a dragon, and I think that's really funny for some reason. I don't even know why, but
he blows up shit maybe because of that. Very fiery.
Yeah, I mean, as I said in the thread on this, like you have to work with this as an actor. Like you do tap into this
character
stuff
in either of the games that, other than maybe like some.
But like in kind of like basic training, you have to kind of like pretend to be different animals. And sorry, somebody said something. I cut them off.
Maybe Mary has a delay. I had this problem before. That's why they were talking over.
Okay, all right. Well, honestly, I've just been talking. I've been looking at the problems. So you've done very well, everyone, managing them. Thank you.
Could you, before you go, could you say Ziegler, because like many people are asking for it? This is so weird. I'm so
the
sorry.
Ziegler, the Ziegler.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With the British accent.
Yeah, the Ziegler. Yeah. You know, I don't know if you know how we invented that, by the way. I don't think I ever explained to you what doing a Ziegler
No,
is.
you just dropped that out of
Because
nowhere.
the meaning has
Yeah.
evolved, but there's a specific origin of the Ziegler, which is that well, I was away, right? I was away for quite a while, and during that time there was some kind of event, and Michael Pithon went as Radzig, right? And his face model is not the same, right? And but what he did is he kind of like cosplayed so well that he made himself look like Radzig, even though he wasn't the base model. And from that moment, that's called doing a Ziegler. So it's kind of like a form of cosplay originally. That's what to do a Ziegler meant. But now the meaning has evolved. I think it's to ziggle off, right? As like ziggling, right? Ziggling is when you're kind of like where you're vacillating, whether you're going to do something, or you're not going to do something. So you can't kind of trust someone who's ziggling. And then if they're ziggling off, right, it means he's running away. So it's kind of like it's his cowardice. Like ziggling is a kind of like, oh, you're a coward, right? And I think anyway. And then obviously the meanings started to gain more sexual connotations that I won't go into now in polite company, but you all know.
And what do you think are like the Zieglets to him, to the Ziegler?
Well, I mean, I don't know. He's got a lot of bastards, right?
Okay, I see. So you're like, okay, so like Henry
That's
is
what
a
the Ziegler.
Zieglet, you would say.
Well, I mean, are you talking about the Zieglets in game or the Zieglets in the fandom?
I mean, depends on who you call a Zieglet. I mean, so far you have only called us a Zieglet.
I didn't coin the expression Zieglet. I think somebody else coined the expression Zieglet. Or did I come up with Zieglet?
I don't know. Wait.
Was it me? I thought it was someone else.
I know I
Really?
used it a couple of times, but I think you came up with it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think someone else came up with that, and I was just riffing off that. I think in the fandom, if your favorite character is Radzig, what does that say about you? It's an interesting question, and I don't want to start any wars. But I think what your favorite character is in Kingdom Come must say something about you, right? In the same way, what your favorite character is in Lord of the Rings must say something about you. I won't say what that thing is because it's too late and it's probably a bit too rude. But if your favorite character is Ziegler, then so be it.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay, I don't want to be a party pooper, but I think it's getting pretty late for everyone.
I think so too. Yeah, I think it's time
so
to wrap up.
we should totally wrap it up. But this was amazing.
Okay, all right.
Honestly.
Lovely speaking to you all, and I'll speak to you again in the future. And we will talk, a bunch of us, and we'll sort out some kind of hardcore mode playthrough attempt. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, all right. Great.
Thank you.
Great to speak to you all. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I want to make sure that
Good night,
we
Thank you.
properly thank.
All right.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye. Good night.
Bye.
See you.
Good night, everyone. Nice questions today.
You're all amazing. Thank you for showing up,
Yes.
honestly.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're amazing, Chris. Thank you so much for hosting this.
Chris, you are a legend. And everybody who
Chris, you're the
spoke up.
goat. Thank you.
I love you all, guys. I love you, all of you. Thank you for being here. I mean, obviously, thanks Logan as well. But yeah, I'll wrap this up. We'll definitely do more of these, if maybe with the other actors as well, if they also want to join in. That'd be great. And obviously, I think Logan is excited to do more stuff with us. So yeah, just thank you all for coming, and yeah, it was awesome. And I'll see you next time.
Bye, Evil Gang.
Bye, Evil Gang.
Bye bye.
Bye, evil gang. Yay. Bye.